My wife left for a girls' trip, leaving me with our paralyzed son who has not walked in 8 years. The moment her car left the driveway, he stood up and walked to me. He whispered, "Dad, we need to leave this house now." I dropped my coffee mug and it shattered on the floor just like the life I thought I knew. I ran to the garage, but we were not fast enough. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight for your life against the people who were supposed to love you. I am Isaiah Zeke Thorne, 72 years old, and I built this house with my own 2 hands. I laid the foundation, poured the concrete, and framed the walls back when my back was strong and my hands were steady. For 40 years, I worked as a structural engineer, ensuring that skyscrapers in downtown Chicago would not collapse under their own weight. I knew how to spot a hairline fracture in a steel beam before it became a catastrophe, but I failed to see the cracks in my own family until the entire roof was about to cave in on my head. It was a Tuesday afternoon and the air in the house felt heavy. Bernice, my wife of 20 years, was fluttering around the hallway like a nervous hummingbird. She was wearing that red lipstick I hated, the one she only wore when she wanted to impress someone or when she was lying. She dragged her Louis Vuitton suitcase to the door, the wheels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floors I had installed myself. "Oh, Zeke, do not look so glum," she said, patting my cheek with a hand that felt colder than usual. "It is just 3 days in Napa with the girls. You and Dante will be fine. The nurse is coming tomorrow morning to help with his bath." I looked at her, trying to find the woman I had married 2 decades ago, but all I saw was a stranger wearing a mask of concern. I looked over her shoulder at Dante, my 35-year-old son, sitting in his wheelchair by the window. He was staring blankly at the driveway, his hands resting limp in his lap. Dante had been in that chair for 8 years, ever since a construction accident crushed his spine. Or at least that is what the doctors told us. That is what we lived with. The ramps, the lifts, the endless medical bills that drained my retirement fund. Bernice walked over to Dante and kissed his forehead. "Be a good boy for your father," she said. Her voice had that sickly sweet tone people use for children or pets, not for grown men. She did not wait for a response. She never did. I watched her walk out the door. I watched her get into her white Mercedes. I watched her back out of the driveway without looking back once. I stood there by the window, clutching my mug of black coffee, feeling a strange mixture of relief and loneliness. The house was finally quiet. I turned around to ask Dante if he wanted the TV turned on. Dante was not in his chair. My heart hammered against my ribs. For a split second, my brain could not process what my eyes were seeing. The wheelchair was empty. The leather seat was still depressed from his weight, but my son was gone. Panic surged through me. Did he fall? Did he slide out? "Dad." The voice came from behind me, strong, clear, authoritative, not the weak mumble I had grown accustomed to over the last decade. I turned around slowly. Dante was standing there. He was standing on his own 2 feet in the middle of the living room. He was not shaking. He was not holding onto furniture for support. He stood 6 feet tall, towering over me just like he did before the accident. His posture was straight. His eyes were sharp, and the blank expression was gone, replaced by a look of intense, terrified urgency. "Lord have mercy, am I dreaming?" I whispered, my hand trembling so hard the coffee sloshed over the rim, burning my knuckles. "We do not have time for shock," Dad, Dante said, stepping closer to me. His stride was confident. He had been walking for a while. He had been hiding it. Why? How? The questions choked me. Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black device. It was a digital recorder. "I have been recovering for 6 months, Dante said, his voice low and fast. "I wanted to surprise you on your birthday." But then I heard them talking. I put a camera under my chair and a recorder in the kitchen vent. "You need to listen to this. Right now." He pressed play. The audio was crisp. It was recorded just last night in our kitchen. I recognized the clinking of wine glasses. Then I heard Bernice's voice. "He is worth more dead, Brad. The life insurance policy pays double for accidental death in the home. Plus, the house goes to me immediately. No probate." Then I heard another voice. A voice that made my blood turn to ice. It was Brad, my son-in-law, the man married to Tasha, my stepdaughter, the man who called me Pops and ate at my table every Sunday. "Are you sure the old man won't put up a fight?" Brad asked on the recording. Bernice laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "Zeke, please. He shakes so much he can barely hold a fork. I have been upping his dosage of the tremors medication for weeks. He is practically a vegetable. Tonight is perfect. You come over after I leave for Napa. We make it look like he tripped at the top of the stairs. A tragic fall for a clumsy old man. The recording stopped. Silence rushed back into the room, but now it was deafening. My hand went numb. The ceramic mug slipped from my fingers and crashed onto the floor, exploding into shards of pottery and splashing dark liquid across my boots and the pristine rug Bernice loved so much. "They are going to kill me," I whispered. The reality of it hit me harder than a physical blow. My wife. The woman I slept next to. The woman I trusted with my life. She was not going on a trip. She was clearing out to have an alibi. Dante grabbed my shoulders. His grip was like iron. "She is not just leaving Dad," she signaled them. "Brad is on his way. We have maybe 5 minutes before they get here to stage the accident. We have to go." The shock vanished, replaced by a cold, hard rage I had not felt since my days in the army. I was not a vegetable. I was not a clumsy old man. I was Isaiah Thorne, and nobody was going to kill me in the house I built. I looked at my son. The son I thought I had lost to a chair. He was back. He was my soldier. "Get the truck," I said, my voice steady. "The old Ford, not the SUV. They will be tracking the GPS on the modern cars." "Where are you going?" Dante asked, moving toward the back door. "I am not leaving empty-handed," I growled. I ran to my study. I did not shuffle. I did not limp. Adrenaline is a powerful drug. I went straight to the bookshelf and pulled out the copy of Moby Dick that was actually a hollowed-out safe box. My hands were not shaking now. I punched in the code. The lock clicked open. Inside lay my Colt 1911. Clean, oiled, loaded. Next to it was the black file, the deed to the house, the original trust documents, the proof that this land belonged to me and my bloodline, not to the vultures circling outside. I shoved the file into my jacket and tucked the gun into the back of my waistband. The cold steel against my spine felt like reassurance. I moved through the hallway, avoiding the windows. I knew the sight lines of my own home. I knew where the shadows were deep enough to hide a man. I burst into the garage. Dante was already there, throwing a tarp over the back of my rusted 1990 Ford F-150. The truck Bernice had begged me to sell for years. The truck that had no computer, no tracking device, and an engine block that could survive a nuclear blast. "Get in," Dante yelled, vaulting into the driver's seat. I scrambled into the passenger side, slamming the heavy metal door. The engine roared to life, spitting black smoke. It was the sound of freedom. Dante hit the garage door opener. The chain rattled and the heavy door began to rise slowly, agonizingly slowly. As the sunlight crept across the concrete floor, revealing the driveway, inch by inch, my stomach dropped. "We are too late," I hissed. Blocking the end of our driveway was not Brad's sports car. It was a black matte van with tinted windows, no license plates. The van doors slid open before the vehicle even came to a full stop. 2 men stepped out. They were huge, wearing tactical gear that looked out of place in our quiet suburban neighborhood. They were not here to help an old man down the stairs. They were here to make sure the old man never got up again. "They are the cleaners," Dante said, shifting the truck into reverse. Brad did not come alone. One of the men reached into his jacket. He was not reaching for a wallet. "Gun!" I yelled. Dante slammed his foot on the gas, but we were facing the wrong way. The garage door was still only halfway up. We were trapped in the box I had built to protect my family, and now it was about to become our coffin. "Hang on, Dad!" Dante yelled, his eyes locking onto the rearview mirror. He did not aim for the driveway. He aimed for the back wall of the garage. The wall I knew was non-load-bearing but covered in drywall and shelving. Dante floored it. The tires screeched against the smooth concrete, sending up clouds of white smoke. The truck lurched backward, roaring like a wounded beast. "We are going through!" I shouted, bracing my hands against the dashboard. The rear bumper of the truck smashed into the drywall with a deafening crunch. Wood splintered. Tools clattered onto the hood. Dust exploded everywhere, blinding us. But we kept moving. We were breaking out of my own house, destroying the sanctuary to save our lives. As we punched through into the backyard, creating our own exit, I saw the front of the black van smash into the garage door we had just abandoned. "They are inside," Dante screamed, spinning the wheel to navigate across the lawn. "Drive, son," I said, pulling the Colt from my waistband and clicking the safety off. "Just drive." We tore across the manicured grass, leaving deep ruts in the earth I had tended for decades. We were running, but the war had just begun. and they had made one fatal mistake. They thought they were hunting a cripple and a helpless senior citizen. They did not know they had just woken up two sleeping lions. Dust and drywall crumbled over the hood of my Ford F-150 as we tore through the back of the garage. The rear tires spun against the wet grass of the lawn before finding traction. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I was not just driving a truck. I was piloting a tank through a war zone. Behind us, the black van had smashed into the reinforced steel garage door I had installed 10 years ago. I knew the specs of that door. It was rated to withstand hurricane force winds. It would hold them, but not for long. "Turn left at the trellis," Dante shouted, pointing toward the narrow gap in the hedges. I yanked the wheel. The truck groaned but obeyed. This was the escape route I had designed when I built this property back in '92. Bernice always complained about the overgrown hedges on the north side. She called them an eyesore. I called them a blind spot. We crashed through the foliage and dropped 4 feet onto the old service road that ran behind the estate. The suspension bottomed out with a bone-jarring thud, but the axle held. Bernice had begged me to sell this truck every month for the last 5 years. She said it was embarrassing. She said it leaked oil on her precious driveway. She wanted me to buy a Tesla something with autopilot and tracking sensors. Now I knew why. You cannot remotely disable a 1990 Ford engine. You cannot track a vehicle that has no computer. I checked the rearview mirror. No black van yet. We had bought ourselves maybe 3 minutes. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs, but my mind was clear. It was the engineer in me taking over. Assess the load, calculate the stress points, prevent the collapse. I looked over at Dante, my son, the boy I had bathed and fed and carried from bed to chair for 8 years. He was sitting upright, checking the magazine of a Glock he had pulled from the glove box. "Talk to me, Dante," I said, my voice low over the roar of the engine. "You have been walking. How long?" 6 months, he said without looking up. 6 months. The number hit me like a physical blow. 6 months of watching me struggle to lift him into the bath. 6 months of letting me grieve for a life he had already reclaimed. Why, I asked. The hurt was there, but I pushed it down. Survival first, feelings later. "Because of Tasha," he said. His voice was hard, harder than I had ever heard it. "I started regaining sensation in my legs last winter. I was going to tell you on Christmas. I was going to walk into the living room and surprise you. But 2 days before Christmas, I heard Tasha and Brad in the sunroom. I kept my eyes on the road, weaving through the back streets of the industrial district to avoid the traffic cameras on the main highway. What did you hear? They were not just talking about money," Dad Dante said, turning to face me. "They were talking about a conservatorship. They had a lawyer drafted up papers claiming you were mentally incompetent. They wanted to put you in a state facility, the kind of place where people go in and never come out. They needed control of your assets, but they could not do it if I was healthy. If I was the capable heir, I would get power of attorney. So I had to stay crippled. I had to be invisible so they would speak freely around me." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. My stepdaughter, the girl I had paid college tuition for, the girl I walked down the aisle. She did not just want my money, she wanted to erase me. "I am sorry I did not tell you," Dante added softly. "I had to gather evidence. I needed enough to bury them before they buried us." The phone in my jacket pocket began to vibrate. It buzzed against my chest like an angry hornet. I pulled it out. The screen flashed the name. Brad. Dante reached for the phone, but I shook my head. "If I do not answer, they know we are running," I said. "If I answer, I can buy us time." I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump. I forced my hand to tremble slightly as I swiped the green button. I had to play the part they wrote for me. The confused, scared old man. "Hello?" I said, letting my voice crack. "Brad, is that you?" "Pop, thank God," Brad's voice came through the speakers, smooth and concerned. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "The security system at the house just tripped. The company called me. They said there was a breach in the garage. Is everything okay? Are you and Dante safe?" I looked at Dante. He was checking the side mirror, his jaw set tight. "I do not know, Brad," I stammered. There was a loud noise, like a crash. I got scared. "I am hiding in the bathroom with Dante. Please, come help us." I lied with the ease of a man who had nothing left to lose. I needed him to think we were trapped. I needed him to send his goons into the house while we put miles between us and them. "Stay right there," Pop Brad said. His tone shifted slightly eager now. "Do not open the door for anyone but me or the police, okay? I am 5 minutes away. I am coming to save you." He hung up. Save me. He was coming to verify the kill. "He is not 5 minutes away," Dante said. "He is probably sitting in his car 2 streets over waiting for the cleanup crew to call him." I tossed the phone onto the floorboard. "Throw it out the window," Dante ordered. "They can ping the tower location." I rolled down the window and hurled the device into a drainage ditch as we sped past. It was my only link to the world, but it was also a leash. Now we were ghosts. We drove in silence for another 20 minutes. The sun was beginning to set, casting long orange shadows across the road. I steered the truck toward the old industrial park on the edge of town. This was the part of the city people forgot about. Rusted warehouses, abandoned factories, and weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement. Pull in there, I pointed to a corrugated metal structure with a faded sign that read, "Thorn Structural Engineering." It was my old workshop. Bernice knew I had a storage unit, but she thought it was just a small locker where I kept old blueprints. She did not know I had kept the lease on the main warehouse even after I retired. It was my sanctuary, my church of steel and concrete. Dante hopped out to open the rolling gate. To see him walk so fluidly, so strongly, brought a sting of tears to my eyes that I quickly blinked away. We parked the truck inside and pulled the heavy metal door shut, turning the lock. Darkness swallowed us, smelling of grease and old timber. I flipped the breaker switch, and the overhead halogen lights buzzed to life, flickering before bathing the space in a harsh yellow glow. "We are safe here for tonight," Dante said, leaning against the truck. "But we need resources. We cannot fight them with a pistol and a tank of gas." I walked over to the corner of the shop where I kept a dusty desktop computer covered with a plastic tarp. It was old, but it was connected to a secure hardline internet connection I used for consulting work I never told Bernice about. "I need to see the damage," I said, pulling the tarp off. I booted up the machine. The fan whirred loudly in the quiet space. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I was afraid. I was not afraid of the men with guns. I was afraid of the numbers. I logged into my primary bank account, the one that held my life savings, the money from the sale of my company, the money meant for Dante's care, the money meant for our golden years. The screen refreshed. I stared at the monitor. I blinked, hoping the pixelation was wrong. Balance $0.00. I checked the savings account. 0. I checked the investment portfolio. Transferred. I checked the emergency fund. Closed. I sat back in the creaky office chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. My hands, which had been steady holding the steering wheel, now began to shake uncontrollably. It was not Parkinson-S. It was rage. Pure, cold rage. "They took it all," I whispered. 40 years of work. 40 years of waking up at 4 in the morning. 40 years of freezing on construction sites in the dead of winter. Gone. Dante walked over and looked at the screen. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "They did not take everything, Dad," he said. I looked up at him. "What is left, son? Look at the screen. It is all gone." Dante reached into his pocket and pulled out the USB drive we had snatched from the house. "They took the numbers," he said. "But they did not take the land. And they did not take us. You built that fortune once. We will take it back. But first we have to survive the night." I looked at the 0 on the screen again. Brad thought this would break me. He thought seeing this would make me curl up and die or turn myself in to the state facility just to get a hot meal. He thought he was dealing with an old man who defined his worth by his bank balance. He was wrong. I stood up, pushing the chair away. I walked over to the workbench and picked up a sledgehammer, feeling the weight of the wood and iron in my hands. Bernice always hated this place because it was dirty, I said, my voice echoing off the metal walls. She wanted to go to Napa. She wanted the high life. Well, she is about to find out that when you strip a man of everything he has to lose, you do not make him poor. You make him dangerous. I turned to Dante. "Open the file cabinet. Get the blueprints for the house. If they want a war, let us show them what happens when you attack the architect." While Dante and I were huddled in the cold, damp darkness of that warehouse, listening to rats scurry across the concrete floor, my son-in-law was popping a cork. I know this because I watched it replay in my mind 1,000 times later, piecing it together from the security footage and the news reports that flooded the city that night. Back at the house that still smelled like the lemon polish Bernice used to mask the scent of her betrayal, Brad and Tasha were sitting on my Italian leather sofa. On the coffee table sat a bottle of Dom Perignon. It was the vintage bottle I had been saving for Dante's wedding day. I had kept it in the back of the cellar, dusting it off once a year, waiting for a miracle that the doctors said would never come. Brad did not care about the sentiment. To him it was just expensive liquid to wash down the taste of victory. Tasha was probably scrolling through her phone looking at listings for luxury condos in Miami. She always hated the winter in Chicago. She hated the snow. She hated the way the cold made my joints ache. She wanted palm trees and ocean views, and she was spending my life savings before my body was even cold. They clinked glasses. The crystal chimed a sour note in the silent house. To freedom, Tasha would have said, taking a sip. To getting rid of the dead weight. But the celebration was premature. The phone on the table buzzed. It was not a social call. It was the cleanup crew. The men in the black van. I can imagine Brad's face as he answered. He expects to hear that the accident has been staged. He expects to hear that I am lying at the bottom of the basement stairs with a broken neck and that Dante has been sedated and sent to a facility. Instead, he heard the sound of failure. What do you mean they are gone? Brad's voice must have cracked. He hates it when things do not go according to his spreadsheets. He is a man who thinks he can control the world with a calculator and a smile. The voice on the other end told him about the smashed garage door, the tire tracks leading into the industrial district, the empty wheelchair left behind like a middle finger to their plans. Brad threw the phone across the room. It bounced off the wall, leaving a scuff mark on the wallpaper I had hung myself 20 years ago. The champagne glass followed, shattering against the fireplace. "He is alive!" Brad roared. "The old man is alive, and he has the cripple with him." Tasha probably panicked then. She is weak. She rides on the coattails of stronger predators. If Zeke talks, we go to jail, she would have whimpered. If he shows the police the bank transfers, we are finished. But Brad is a cockroach, and cockroaches are survivors. He paced the room, his mind spinning faster than a slot machine. He knew he could not hunt us down physically, not with the police already alerted to the truck. He had to change the battlefield. If he could not kill my body, he had to kill my credibility. He turned to Tasha, his eyes cold and calculating. "Get the makeup remover," he ordered. "Mess up your hair. Rip your blouse a little. We need to look like victims." Victims. The audacity of it made my blood boil as I sat on a crate in the warehouse staring at the small portable television I had plugged into the generator. The screen was fuzzy. The antenna bent, but the picture was clear enough. Breaking news flashed across the bottom of the screen in urgent red letters. I leaned in closer, the stale sandwich I was eating turning to ash in my mouth. The channel cut to a live feed. There, standing in front of my house, surrounded by police lights and yellow tape, was Brad. He was not wearing his arrogant smirk. He was wearing a mask of absolute devastation. He had taken off his tie. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, looking disheveled. He was holding Tasha, who was sobbing into a tissue, burying her face in his chest so no one could see her dry eyes. A reporter with a microphone thrust it toward Brad's face. "Mr. Thorne, can you tell us what happened inside the residence tonight?" Brad looked directly into the camera. He looked right at me. "It is a tragedy," he said, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "We came over to check on my father-in-law, Zeke. He has been battling severe dementia for years. We tried to keep it private. We wanted to protect his dignity. But lately the violent outbursts have been getting worse." He paused to wipe a non-existent tear. "Tonight he snapped," Brad continued. "He was delusional. He kept screaming that people were stealing his money. He pulled a gun on my wife, on his own daughter. We tried to calm him down, but he was not Zeke anymore. He was someone else." The reporter gasped. "And your brother-in-law, Dante." Brad's face crumpled. "That is the part that kills me. Dante is paralyzed. Hey. He cannot defend himself. He cannot run. Zeke forced him into the truck at gunpoint. My brother-in-law is a hostage. He has serious medical needs. Without his medication, without his wheelchair, he could die within 24 hours. Tasha let out a loud, dramatic wail for the cameras. "Please, just bring my brother home," she cried. "Dad, if you can hear this, please do not hurt him. We forgive you. We just want Dante back safe." The reporter turned to the camera, her face grave. "You heard it here first, folks. A manhunt is underway for Isaiah Zeke Thorne, a 72-year-old man described as armed, dangerous, and mentally unstable. Authorities believe he has abducted his disabled son. If you see this man, do not approach. Call 911 immediately. I sat back in the darkness listening to the hum of the warehouse lights. My hands were clenched into fists, so tight my fingernails dug into my palms. They stole my money. They tried to take my life, and now they were stealing my name. In the eyes of the city, I was not a victim. I was a monster, a senile old lunatic who kidnapped his own crippled son. Dante was sitting next to me on a pile of old drop cloths. He was watching the screen, his jaw set so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. He looked down at his legs, the legs that had walked him out of that burning house, the legs that Brad said were useless. "This is it," Dante said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is the mistake we needed, Dad." He stood up. He walked to the center of the room, pacing back and forth with the energy of a caged tiger. "He is lying to the whole world," Dante said, gesturing at the TV. "He says I am a hostage. He says I am a cripple. All I have to do is walk into a police station. Just walk in. The moment they see me standing, the moment they see I am not strapped to a chair, his entire story falls apart. It proves he is a liar. It proves everything he said is a fabrication." Dante grabbed his jacket. "Let us go. Right now." We drive to the precinct. I walk in. Game over. He was reaching for the keys to the truck. He was ready to end it. I stood up and blocked his path. "No," I said. Dante stopped, looking at me with confusion and anger. "What do you mean, no? Look at him, Dad. He is destroying you on live television. We can stop this." "Sit down, son," I said, my voice steady and cold. Dante threw his hands up. "Why? Why are we waiting? Every second we wait, the police get closer to finding us. Every second we wait, people believe I am dying without medication I do not even need, because walking is not enough," I said, stepping closer to him, putting my hands on his shoulders. "Listen to me, Dante. Brad is a financial advisor. He plays the long game. If you walk into that police station tonight, yes, you prove you can walk. And what will Brad say?" I mimicked Brad, a smooth, slippery voice. "Oh, thank God. It is a miracle." My prayers were answered. The shock of the kidnapping must have triggered a recovery. Dante frowned. He would not say that. He would, I insisted. He would spin it. He would cry tears of joy. He would say he didn't know. He would play the fool. And then he would pivot back to me. He would say that my dementia is still real. He would say that just because you can walk does not mean I did not pull a gun, does not mean I did not kidnap you, does not mean I am competent to manage my money. I pointed a finger at his chest. "Proving you can walk only saves you, Dante. It does not save the house. It does not get back the money. And it definitely does not put Brad and Tasha in prison. It just makes them look like worried relatives who made a mistake." Dante slumped slightly, the adrenaline fading, leaving him tired. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We just let him lie. We let him tell the world you are crazy." "Yes," I said, turning back to the glowing screen where Brad was now hugging the police chief. "We let him build his tower of lies. We let him stack it so high that when it falls, it crushes him completely." I walked over to the table and picked up the stack of papers we had stolen. "The real evidence. We do not need to prove you can walk, Dante. Not yet. We need to prove they committed fraud. We need to prove attempted murder. We need to catch them when they feel safe." I looked at Brad's image on the screen one last time. "He thinks he has won the public opinion," I whispered. "He thinks he has checkmated the old man. But he forgot one thing about structural engineering." "What is that?" Dante asked quietly. I picked up a marker and circled a date on the calendar hanging on the wall. "The higher you build on a rotten foundation," I said, "the louder the crash when it comes down." Brad just went on TV and committed to a narrative. He locked himself into a story. Now all we have to do is wait for him to make the one move that contradicts it. And he will. Greed always makes people sloppy. He thinks I'm running in the woods. He thinks you are dying in a chair. He is going to try to sell the house tomorrow. He is going to try to liquidate the assets before the courts can freeze them for the investigation. I looked at my son, and for the first time that night I smiled. A cold, grim smile. Let him enjoy his champagne tonight. Tomorrow we remind him that this is not his game. It is ours. And we are not playing by his rules anymore. The house I built stood on the hill like a fortress of shadows. From the outside it looked peaceful. The security lights cast long golden beams across the lawn, and the windows were dark. To anyone driving by, it was just another wealthy estate sleeping through the night. But to me, it was a crime scene waiting to be processed. We parked the stolen sedan we had swapped for the truck 3 miles away in a grocery store parking lot. We walked the rest of the way through the woods, cutting through the property line where the fence had rusted out. I knew about the hole in the fence because I had meant to fix it last spring. I never got around to it. Now that laziness was the only reason we could get onto my own land without tripping the perimeter alarms. Dante moved ahead of me. Watching him move was like watching a ghost come back to life. For 8 years I had seen him withered in a chair. Now he was crouching low, moving with the silent grace of a hunter. His legs were strong, his balance was perfect. The rage fueled him just as it fueled me. We did not go for the doors. Brad would have changed the codes. We did not go for the windows. Tasha would have armed the glass brake sensors. We went for the roof. I stopped at the base of the old oak tree that grew near the east wing. Bernice had wanted to cut it down 5 years ago. She said the leaves clogged the gutters. I refused. I told her the tree gave the house character. The truth was, I liked the tree because it was the only living thing on the property that I did not pay for. "Give me a boost," Dante whispered. I laced my fingers together and he stepped into my hands, hoisting himself up to the lowest branch. He reached down and pulled me up. My shoulders screamed in protest. I was 72 years old and my joints felt like they were filled with broken glass. But I did not make a sound. I bit my lip until I tasted iron and pulled myself onto the limb. We climbed until we reached the roofline. The shingles were still warm from the day's sun. We crawled on our bellies toward the large industrial exhaust vent near the chimney. When I designed this house 20 years ago, I over-engineered everything. Most residential vents are 12 inches wide. I made mine 24. I wanted maximum airflow. I wanted the house to breathe. I never imagined that one day I would be the one crawling through its lungs. Dante pulled the vent cover loose. I had installed it with a simple latch mechanism, not screws. Another engineer's quirk that saved us time. We slipped inside. The air in the ducts was stale and smelled of dust and the faint metallic tang of copper. It was tight. I had to drag my body forward using my elbows, my knees scraping against the galvanized steel. Every movement sounded like a thunderclap to my ears, but I knew the insulation I had wrapped around these pipes would dampen the sound. We crawled for what felt like an hour. We passed the guest room. Empty. We passed the kitchen. Silent. Then we reached the junction above the master bedroom. A soft light filtered up through the slats of the vent cover. I could hear music. Soft jazz. The kind of music Bernice played when she wanted to feel sophisticated. I crept forward until I could look down through the metal grate. My heart, which had been pounding with fear, suddenly stopped and turned into a stone in my chest. Bernice was not in Napa. She was not on a girls' trip. She was in my bed. She was wearing the silk robe I had bought her for our anniversary. She was holding a glass of red wine, and she was not alone. Lying next to her on the Egyptian cotton sheets I had paid for was a man. He was young, maybe 30. He had the smooth, sculpted look of a personal trainer or a model. He was running his hand through Bernice's hair, and she was laughing. A sound I had not heard in years. A genuine, happy laugh. I watched as she leaned over and kissed him. It was not a peck. It was hungry, passionate. Dante was beside me. I felt his body tense up. He reached for his gun. I put my hand on his wrist and squeezed. Not yet. We were not here for revenge, not the bloody kind. We were here for the safe. The safe was hidden behind the oil painting of the seascape on the far wall. Inside that steel box was the original prenuptial agreement. Bernice thought I had burned it. She thought the copy in the Lawyer S office was the only one, and she had already bribed him to shred it. She did not know I kept the wet ink original. That document stated clearly that in the event of infidelity, she got nothing. 0. And next to it was the USB drive, the crypto wallet, the digital key to $5 million I had siphoned off from my business sales before the marriage. Brad knew it existed. He had been tearing the house apart looking for it. We just had to wait for them to sleep. But then they started talking. And what I heard was worse than the sight of them together. So the boy toy asked, taking a sip of my wine, "Is the old man really gone?" Bernice giggled. She traced a finger down his chest. He is gone, baby. Even if he is not dead, he is never coming back here. Brad has it all under control. The police think he is a dangerous lunatic. Even if he walks through that front door right now, they will tackle him and sedate him before he can say a word. You are bad, the man laughed. I did what I had to do, Bernice said, her voice dropping an octave. Do you know how hard it was living with him? He was so boring, always talking about structures and foundations, always counting pennies. But he was healthy, the man said. I mean, for an old guy. How did he deteriorate so fast? My grandma had Parkinson's disease, and it took 10 years to get that bad. Zeke went downhill in like 3 years. I pressed my face closer to the grate. The metal dug into my cheek. This was it. The question I had asked myself 1,000 times. Why were my hands shaking? Why could I not button my own shirt? Why did I drool when I slept? Bernice sat up. She looked at the man with a sly smile. He did not have Parkinson's, you idiot. The man looked confused. But the doctors said. Doctors diagnose what they see. Bernice interrupted. They saw tremors. They saw muscle weakness. They saw confusion. They did not test for heavy metals because who tests a wealthy retired engineer for arsenic? The air in the vent seemed to vanish. I could not breathe. Arsenic. It is tasteless. Bernice continued, proud of herself. It is odorless. I bought it online from a supply company in China. I put a tiny pinch in his special dark roast coffee every single morning, just enough to make the nerves misfire, just enough to make his hands shake so bad he could not sign a check without my help. She laughed again. A cruel, soulless sound. He thanked me for that coffee every day. He called me his angel. He said, Bernice, you make the best coffee in the world. And all the while I was slowly turning off his lights one by one. I closed my eyes. Tears hot and stinging leaked out. Every morning. I saw myself sitting at the kitchen table, my hands trembling so hard the cup rattled against the saucer. I saw Bernice standing there smiling, pouring the steaming black liquid. Here you go, darling, drink up, it will help you wake up. I drank it. I drank my own death. I thanked her for it. I kissed her hand, the same hand that was measuring out poison while I slept. The tremors were not age. The confusion was not dementia. I was not broken. I was being murdered by the woman I shared my bed with. Dante's hand found mine in the dark. He gripped it so hard I thought he might break my fingers. He was shaking too. Not from fear, but from a fury so pure it radiated off him like heat. I opened my eyes. I looked at my son. In the dim light of the vent, I saw a tear track cutting through the dust on his face. We stared at each other. No words were needed. The plan had changed. We were not just going to take the money. We were not just going to take the house. We were going to destroy them. We were going to burn their world down, and we were going to use their own words as the match. Bernice leaned back against the pillows. Do not worry about Zeke, she said, closing her eyes. By next week, his kidneys will fail or his heart will give out from the stress. The autopsy will just show natural causes. And then, baby, this house is ours. All ours. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the tiny spy camera I had brought. I aimed it through the grate. I recorded the lovers. I recorded the confession. I recorded the date and time. The red light on the camera blinked silently in the darkness. Sleep well, Bernice, I thought. Sleep well, because when you wake up, the nightmare begins. We waited. We waited for 2 hours until the wine and the sex and the arrogance lulled them into a deep sleep. When their breathing evened out, I signaled to Dante. He pulled a small screwdriver from his belt. Silently, skillfully, he undid the latch of the vent. We were going in, not as thieves, but as the ghosts they created. And ghosts, as everyone knows, are very hard to kill. The metal grate of the air vent dug into my chest, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was the vibration of my son's body next to me. Dante was shaking. Not from the palsy that had plagued him for years, but from a murderous rage that was threatening to blow our cover. We had just heard Bernice confess to poisoning me. We had heard her laugh about turning a strong man into a trembling invalid with a pinch of arsenic in his morning coffee. Dante's hand moved to his belt. He was reaching for the gun. His breathing was ragged, sharp, jagged gasps that sounded like a saw cutting through bone. He was going to kick the vent cover open. He was going to drop down into that bedroom and put a bullet in the woman who had slowly killed his father and the man who was defiling his bed. I reached out and clamped my hand over his wrist. My grip was iron. The tremors Bernice had induced were gone, replaced by the adrenaline of survival. I squeezed his arm until I felt the bone flex. I looked him in the eye in the dark, dusty tunnel of the ventilation shaft. I shook my head slowly, 1 inch to the left, 1 inch to the right. No. If we killed them now, we would be the monsters they painted us to be. We would be the violent lunatics Brad described on the news. We would spend the rest of our lives in a cage. I did not want them dead. I wanted them destroyed. I wanted them to live long enough to see everything they stole stripped away piece by piece. Dante stared at me. His eyes were wild, but slowly the soldier in him took over. He nodded. He released the grip on his weapon. We were not assassins. We were engineers. And engineers do not just smash things. We dismantle them. We crawled backward away from the master bedroom. The sounds of Bernice and her lover faded, replaced by the hollow silence of the house. We navigated the maze of ducts until we were positioned over the study, my study, the room where I had designed skyscrapers. The room where I had taught Dante to play chess. Below us I could hear voices, angry voices. It was Brad and Tasha. They were not celebrating anymore. We peered through the slats of the vent. The study looked like a hurricane had hit it. Books were pulled off the shelves. Drawers were yanked out and overturned. My mahogany desk, the one I had imported from Brazil, was covered in scratches. They were looking for the USB drive. They were looking for the crypto keys. "I cannot find it," Brad shouted, kicking a pile of my architectural journals. The old man must have buried it in the yard, or maybe he swallowed it. Who knows, with that senile freak. Tasha was sitting on the leather armchair chewing her fingernail, a nasty habit she never outgrew. "Brad, we have to stop," she whined. "If Zeke is really gone, maybe we should just sell what we can and leave. The police are asking too many questions. What if they check the bank transfers?" Brad stopped pacing. He walked over to her and grabbed her by the shoulders. His face was twisted in a mask of greed that made him look demonic under the desk lamp. "We are not leaving, Tasha," he hissed. "We are closer than ever. Who cares about the bank transfers? I have already set up the offshore accounts, but the real money is the land." He walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling lawn I had manicured for decades. "I got the call from the developers today," Brad said, his voice dropping to a chilling calm. "They are offering $3 million for the lot alone. They do not want the house." Tasha blinked. "They do not want the house. But Dad built this house. It is iconic." Brad laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "It is a tear-down, Tasha. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I am signing the contract. By next week, the bulldozers will be here. They are going to flatten this place. They are going to crush every brick, every beam, every memory of that old man into dust. Then they are going to build luxury condos." I felt a coldness settle in my gut that had nothing to do with the temperature. They were going to bulldoze it. This house was not just wood and stone. It was the physical manifestation of my life's work. I had laid the foundation with my own hands. I had framed the walls when Dante was just a baby sleeping in a playpen on the subfloor. I had carved my late wife's initials into the main beam in the attic. And Brad was going to wipe it off the face of the earth like it was nothing more than an anthill. Brad turned back to Tasha. "The old man, dead or alive, does not matter. Once the ink is dry on that contract, the house is gone. And if Zeke shows up, then well, he will just be a trespasser on a construction site. Accidents happen on construction sites all the time." He grabbed a bottle of scotch from my shelf, poured a drink, and downed it in one gulp. "Go to sleep, Tasha. Big day tomorrow. We are selling the kingdom." They left the room, switching off the lights, leaving the study in darkness. I waited 5 full minutes. I counted every second in my head. Then I signaled to Dante. We popped the vent cover. I lowered myself down first, hanging by my fingertips, before dropping silently onto the carpet. My knees protested, but I ignored the pain. Dante followed, landing with the soft thud of a cat. We were in. I went straight to the large oil painting of the Chicago skyline hanging behind my desk. Brad had torn the room apart, but he lacked imagination. He looked in drawers and boxes. He never looked at the art. I reached behind the frame and found the small hidden catch. The painting swung forward on a hinge, revealing the wall safe. Brad had tried to drill it. I could see the scratch marks on the dial. But this was a custom job, titanium plate. You could not drill it. You needed the combination. And the combination was the date I laid the first brick of this house, a date only I knew. I spun the dial. Left, left, click. The heavy door swung open. I reached in and my hand closed around the cool metal of the USB drive. It was there. The $5 million in cryptocurrency. The war chest we needed. Next to it was the black file folder containing the original deed and the irrevocable trust documents. I shoved them into my jacket pocket. "We got it," Dante whispered. "Let us go." I looked at the door, then I looked at the room. My sanctuary violated by greed. "Not yet," I said. I reached into the cargo pocket of my work pants. I pulled out a small plastic case. Inside were 5 tiny black objects. They looked like buttons. Spy cameras, high definition, wireless, with sensitive microphones. "Why?" Dante asked, checking the hallway. "We have what we came for." "Because I want to see his face," I whispered. "I want to see his face when the police put the cuffs on him. And I want the world to hear what he said about killing me." I worked fast. My hands were steady now, precision tools once again. I placed the first camera inside the ornate chandelier above the desk. It had a perfect view of the entire room. I placed the second one inside the hollowed-out spine of a law book on the shelf facing the door. I moved to the power outlet near the floor. I unscrewed the faceplate and tucked a listening device inside, wiring it directly to the house's power so it would never run out of battery. I placed 2 more in the hallway, hidden in the smoke detectors. I was not just bugging a room, I was setting a stage. Tomorrow, when Brad signed that contract, he would be the star of his own reality show. A show that would end with a prison sentence. "Done," I said, snapping the last faceplate back on. We moved to the window. It was easier to go out the ground floor than to climb back into the roof. I disabled the alarm sensor on the sash using a magnet, a trick I learned from a locksmith years ago. We slipped out into the cool night air. The grass was wet with dew, soaking my boots. We stayed low, hugging the shadows of the hedges, moving toward the breach in the fence where we had entered. We were 50 yards from the property line when the world exploded in blue and red light. A police cruiser was rolling slowly down the street, its spotlight sweeping the trees. It was not looking for speeders. It was looking for a fugitive. "Get down," Dante hissed, tackling me into the dirt behind a row of garbage cans. The cruiser stopped. The spotlight beam cut through the darkness, missing us by inches. I could hear the radio chatter. Suspicious vehicle reported near the north perimeter, checking it out. They were looking for our rental car. They had found it. We were cut off. "We cannot make it to the woods," Dante whispered. "They will see us crossing the open field." I looked around. We were trapped in the service alley behind the neighbor's house. There was nowhere to hide, except one place. The large industrial dumpster behind the neighbor's renovation project. It was overflowing with trash-rotting drywall and bags of household waste. "In there," I said, pointing. Dante looked at me with disgust. "Dad, seriously. Live in trash or die in cuffs," I said. "Your choice." We scrambled up the side of the dumpster and dropped in. The smell hit me like a physical punch. Rotting food, dirty diapers, stagnant water. I sank down into a pile of wet insulation, pulling a black garbage bag over my head. Dante crouched next to me, pulling a piece of plywood over himself. We lay there in the filth in the absolute darkness, breathing through our mouths to keep from retching. The police cruiser rolled closer. I could hear the gravel crunching under its tires. The spotlight swept over the dumpster. I saw the beam of light cut through the cracks in the metal container, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the foul air. I held my breath. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure the cop could hear it. I was Isaiah Thorne. I was a structural engineer. I was a millionaire. I had built a legacy. And now I was lying in a dumpster covered in slime, hiding from the very system I had paid taxes to support for 50 years. But as I lay there smelling the stench of decay, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Let them think I am trash. Let them think I am discarded, because tomorrow the trash was going to rise up, and it was going to burn their whole world down. We lay there for 2 hours, 120 minutes of silence and stench, waiting for the enemy to blink. And in the dark, I began to formulate the next step of the plan, the step that would turn their victory party into a funeral. The smell of Marcus Vance's office was a combination of stale cigar smoke, cheap bourbon, and old paper. It was located above the laundromat on the south side of the city, A place where the neon sign buzzed incessantly and the sirens never seemed to stop wailing. To most people, it looked like a hole in the wall. To me, it looked like a bunker. We had made it there just before dawn, moving through back alleys and avoiding the main roads. Dante was sitting in the corner on a cracked leather chair, his face smeared with grime from the dumpster, but his eyes bright and alert. I sat across from Marcus, watching him scroll through the data on the USB drive we had stolen from the safe. The only light in the room came from the glow of the computer monitor illuminating the deep lines on Marcus' face. He was an old friend from the Union days back when legal battles were fought with baseball bats as often as with briefcases. He took a long drag from his cigarette and exhaled a cloud of blue smoke. "They cleaned you out, Zeke," Marcus said, his voice gravelly and low. "It is worse than I thought. Worse than I—" "The crypto accounts, the retirement funds, the savings. Brad moved it all into offshore shells in the Cayman Islands 3 days ago. By the time we get a court order to unseal those accounts, the money will have bounced through a dozen jurisdictions. It is gone." Dante leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of the chair. "So that is it. We risked our lives for nothing. We are broke." I looked at my son. He was thinking like a young man. He was thinking about cash, about liquidity. He did not understand that real wealth is not what you have in the bank. It is what you stand on. I reached into my wet jacket and pulled out the black file folder. It was damp and smelled of garbage, but the documents inside were wrapped in plastic. "Marcus," I said, leaning forward, "stop looking at the money. Brad can have the cash, he can have the stocks, he can have the gold watch I got for 20 years of service. Look at the land." Marcus frowned, tapping a few keys on his keyboard. "What land, Zeke?" "Brad is selling the house tomorrow. He has the power of attorney. He has the deed." "No," I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. "He has a deed. He does not have the deed." I tossed the black folder onto the cluttered desk. It landed with a heavy thud. Marcus opened it. He scanned the first page, then he stopped. He adjusted his glasses and leaned closer. He flipped to the second page, then the third. He looked up at me, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw genuine shock on his face. "You old fox," he whispered. "The Phoenix Trust." Dante looked between us, confused. "What is the Phoenix Trust?" I turned to my son. 5 years ago, when I had my first tremor, Bernice told me it was just stress. But I did not trust her. Call it instinct. Call it the paranoia of a man who grew up fighting for everything he had. I went to see Marcus secretly. I set up an irrevocable trust. I transferred the title of the land, the house, and the workshop into it. I pointed at the document in Marcus's hands. "I do not own the house, Dante. You do?" Dante's mouth fell open. "Me. The trust owns it," I explained, "and you are the sole beneficiary. But here is the kicker. It is an irrevocable trust. That means I cannot change it. Bernice cannot change it. And Brad certainly cannot touch it. The moment I signed those papers, the property ceased to be my asset. It became yours, held in safety until you were ready." Marcus let out a low whistle. "This changes everything. Brad is selling a property he does not have the title to. If he signs that contract with the developers tomorrow, he is committing fraud on a massive scale. It is a federal crime. So we have him," Dante said, standing up. "We take this to the judge. We show him the trust. We stop the sale." Marcus shook his head slowly, the smoke swirling around him. "Sit down, kid. It is not that simple. If it were that simple, I would be drinking champagne instead of this rot-gut whiskey." "Why not?" I asked, feeling the tension return to my shoulders. "The law is black and white. The law is a gray fog," Marcus said, tapping a specific paragraph on the document. "Look at Clause 7, Section B. The beneficiary must be of sound mind and body and must demonstrate the capacity to manage the estate. If the beneficiary is deemed incapacitated or dependent, the control of the trust reverts to the legal guardian of the beneficiary." The room went silent. The buzzing of the neon sign outside seemed to get louder. I felt a pit open in my stomach. I remembered that clause. I had put it in there to protect Dante. Back then, he was deep in depression, barely eating, barely speaking. I was afraid that if I died, someone would manipulate him. I wanted to ensure that a guardian would watch over the assets until Dante recovered. I engineered a failsafe, I whispered. And now that failsafe is a weapon against us. Exactly, Marcus said. Right now, in the eyes of the law, Dante is a paralyzed invalid who requires 24-hour care. And who is his legal guardian if you are deemed mentally incompetent, Zeke? Brad, Dante said, his voice hollow. Brad, Marcus confirmed. Tasha is his next of kin, but Brad calls the shots. If you reveal this trust now, Brad will just thank you. He will say Dante is incapable of managing a multi-million-dollar estate. He will step in as the trustee guardian. He will sell the land on Dante's behalf, claiming it is for his medical care. He will take the money, and he will legally be allowed to do it. So we are trapped, I said, slamming my hand on the desk. Even if Dante walks into court, Brad will argue it is a temporary recovery, or he will argue that physical recovery does not mean mental competency. He has already painted us as unstable. Marcus nodded, rubbing his temples. Brad has played a very good game. He has created a narrative where you are crazy and your son is helpless. To break that narrative, we cannot just show a piece of paper. We need proof. Unquestionable, undeniable proof. Dante looked at his legs. I can walk. I can run. I am strong. It is not about muscles, Kid Marcus said. It is about the mind. To activate the trust and take control away from Brad, you need a certificate of competency. You need a medical evaluation from a board-certified neurologist and a psychiatrist stating that you are fully capable of managing your own affairs. Great, Dante said, reaching for his jacket. Send me to a doctor. I will pass any tests they give me. Which doctor? Marcus asked with a cynical smirk. Dr. Steinberg, the one who diagnosed your father with dementia. Or maybe Dr. Phillips at the city hospital who plays golf with Brad every Sunday. Brad knows every specialist in this town. If we walk into a hospital the moment you give your name, the system alerts him. Before you even finish the intake form, the police will be there to drag you back to the house. I stood up and walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the rain-slicked street below. I felt the weight of the city pressing down on me. The system was designed to protect people like Brad, people with connections, people with money, people who looked the part. It was not designed for an old black man and his disabled son. We cannot use the system, I said, turning back to them. The system is compromised. So what do we do? Marcus asked. We have less than 6 hours before Brad signs that contract. Once he signs it, the developers will transfer the funds. Even if we prove fraud later, the money will be in the wind. We need to stop him before the pen hits the paper. I looked at the trust document. I looked at the medical clause. We need a doctor, I said. But not just any doctor. We need someone who cannot be bought. Someone who cannot be silenced. And we need the evaluation to happen in a place where Brad cannot interfere. Where Marcus asked. In a church. In a bunker. No, I said, my mind working through the structural problem, finding the leverage point. Publicly. I looked at Dante. Brad said you were dying. He said you needed medication to survive the night. He staked his entire reputation on the fact that without him you are helpless. I am not helpless, Dante said, his jaw set. Then we need to show the world, I said. Not tell them. Show them. We need a medical evaluation that happens in real time in front of witnesses, in front of cameras. We need to force Brad into a corner where he cannot lie because the truth is staring him in the face. Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. You are talking about a spectacle, Zeke. I am talking about a stress test, I corrected. When you want to prove a bridge can hold weight, you do not write a report. You drive a tank over it. I grabbed a piece of paper and a pen. Marcus, find us a doctor. I do not care if he has lost his license. I do not care if he works out of a van. I just need someone who has a stamp and a grudge against the establishment. Marcus chuckled. I know a guy. Dr. Aris. He was the chief of neurology until he blew the whistle on a pharmaceutical company and got blacklisted. He drives a cab now. He hates the system more than you do. Call him, I ordered. Tell him to meet us. Where? Dante asked. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 5 a.m. The sun would be up soon. The city was waking up. There is only one place where Brad will feel safe, I said. One place where he thinks he is the king. The signing ceremony, Dante realized. Exactly, I said. He is holding a press conference at the house at 9 a.m. to announce the sale. He wants to show off. He wants the developers to see him as a big shot. He invited the press. I picked up the black file folder and tucked it back into my jacket. We are going to crash the party. But we are not going in through the back door this time. We are walking in through the front. And we are bringing the doctor with us. But first, I said, looking at Dante's dirty clothes and my own grime-streaked face, we need to look the part. If we walk in looking like fugitives, they will treat us like fugitives. If we walk in looking like owners, they will hesitate. And that hesitation is all the time we need. Dante stood up straighter. He brushed the dust off his jacket. "Let us go get my inheritance, Dad." I nodded. The fear was gone. The exhaustion was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard geometry of the plan. Brad had built a house of cards. We were about to open the window. The sun had not even fully risen over the horizon, but the circus was already in town. From the cracked window of the taxi Dr. Aris was driving, I watched the scene unfold on the live stream playing on my phone. It was happening right there on my front lawn. The lawn I had mowed every Saturday for 20 years. The lawn where I had taught Dante to throw a baseball before the world took his legs. Now it was a stage for the greatest performance of Brad's life. He had organized a prayer vigil, that is what the banner said. Pray for Zeke and Dante. It was strung up between two oak trees, the letters painted in somber black. But it was not a vigil. It was a press conference disguised as a church service. There were candles flickering in the morning light which looked ridiculous. There were neighbors, people I had known for decades, standing around looking somber. And in the center of it all was Brad wearing a black suit that cost more than my first car, holding a microphone like he was a preacher at a revival. "We are broken," Brad said to the crowd, his voice cracking perfectly on cue. "We are a family torn apart by mental illness. My father-in-law, Zeke Thorne, is a good man, or at least he was. But the man roaming these streets today is not Zeke. He is a shell, a dangerous, confused shell who has taken my disabled brother-in-law hostage." I watched Dante sitting next to me in the back seat of the cab. He was watching the same stream. His fists were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. "He is terrified," Dante whispered. "Look at his eyes, Dad. He keeps looking at the driveway. He is not praying. He is waiting for the police to haul our bodies in." Brad continued his sermon. He looked directly into the news cameras. There were 5 of them. He had invited every network in the city. "I have a message for the police," Brad said, wiping a fake tear. "If you see Zeke, do not hesitate. He is armed. He is paranoid. He has stated he will not be taken alive. Please prioritize the safety of the hostage. Do whatever is necessary to stop him." I felt a chill run down my spine. Do whatever is necessary. That was code. That was a direct order given on national television. He was giving the police permission to shoot a 72-year-old black man on sight. He was painting a target on my chest and calling it compassion. Bernice was standing next to him. She was wearing a black dress and a veil. A veil. As if I were already dead. She was leaning on Brad for support, trembling. The audience saw a grieving wife. I saw a woman terrified that her check was about to bounce. I looked at the burner phone in my hand. It was a cheap prepaid model Marcus had bought at a gas station. It was untraceable. "It is time," I said to Marcus, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. Marcus nodded. He handed me the memory card reader. I did not send the video to the network broadcasting Brad's speech. That would be too easy. They were Brad's friends. They would bury it. I chose Channel 8, the rival station, the one that hated Brad's firm because he refused to buy ad space with them. They were hungry. They were vicious. And they were live on the scene too, standing at the back of the crowd. I attached the file. It was a short clip, just 30 seconds. It was from the night before. The footage from the camera I had hidden in the chandelier. It showed Bernice sitting on the sofa holding a glass of wine. Brad was pacing. "I hope the old fool freezes out there," Bernice's voice rang out clear and sharp on the video. "It would save us the cost of a nursing home. Maybe he will do us a favor and fall into a ravine." And then Brad's voice. "Forget him. Once I sign the papers tomorrow, the bulldozers will bury any evidence he ever lived here." I hit send. We sat in the taxi parked 3 blocks away and waited. It takes time for a bomb to detonate. First there is the silence, then the spark, then the fire. On the screen I saw a producer from Channel 8 touch her earpiece. Her eyes went wide. She looked down at her tablet. Then she signaled to her reporter. The reporter, a young woman with sharp eyes, pushed her way to the front of the crowd. She did not wait for the prayer to finish. "Mr. Thorne, Mrs. Thorne," she shouted, her voice cutting through Brad's monologue. "We have just received a video sent anonymously to our newsroom. It appears to be dated from last night inside your home." Brad froze. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second. I saw the panic. The real panic. In this video, the reporter continued holding up her tablet for the other cameras to see. Mrs. Thorne is heard wishing death upon her husband. and you, Mr. Thorne, are heard discussing destroying evidence. Care to comment? A murmur rippled through the crowd. The neighbors stopped praying. The other reporters smelled blood. They swarmed forward, microphones thrust out like spears. Bernice looked like she was going to faint, and this time it was not an act. She grabbed Brad's arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. Brad snatched the microphone back. His face was red, not with grief, but with fury. "That is a lie," he shouted over the noise. "That is fake." He turned to Bernice, gripping her shoulder hard enough to bruise. "Tell them, Bernice. Tell them it is not real." Bernice stepped up to the mic. She was shaking. She looked into the camera, and I saw the terror in her eyes. She was not afraid of me. She was afraid of the man standing next to her. "It is AI," she stammered. Her voice was thin, reedy. "It is a deep fake. Someone is using technology to hurt us. My husband and I never said those things. We love Zeke. We are victims of cyber terrorism." Brad jumped back in, seizing the narrative. "You see," he bellowed, pointing a finger at the camera. "This is exactly what I mean. Zeke was an engineer. He knows computers. He has access to technology. He is taunting us. He is using deepfake software to frame us while he drags my crippled brother-in-law through the woods. This is sick. This is proof of his insanity." I watched as the crowd swayed. They were confused. Deepfakes were scary. They were plausible. Brad was good. He was very good. He had taken a smoking gun and turned it into a water pistol. The reporters lowered their microphones slightly. They were unsure. Dante hit the back of the seat. He spun it. He hissed. He spun it right back around. Now he looks like the victim of a tech-savvy madman. I sat back in the seat watching the screen. I was not angry. I was impressed. A structural engineer appreciates a good support system even if it is built on lies. Brad had braced the collapse, but he had made a mistake. He claimed I was in the woods. He claimed I was using a computer to make fake videos from a hideout. He claimed I was a ghost haunting him from the shadows. "He is doubling down," I said quietly. "He is committing to the lie that I am far away, that I am hiding." Dr. Harris turned around from the driver's seat. He had a grim smile on his face. "So when do we show them you are not a ghost, Zeke?" I looked at the time on the dashboard. It was 8:45. The signing with the developers was scheduled for 9 inside the house. "Now," I said. Marcus handed me a clean pressed suit he had picked up from a thrift store. It was not my style. It was a little tight in the shoulders, but it was clean. Dante pulled a tie out of his pocket. "Brad wants a show," I said, buttoning the shirt. "He wants a villain. He wants a spectacle." I looked at the live feed one last time. Brad was ushering the press away, guiding the developers toward the front door. He looked relieved. He thought he had survived the leak. He thought the deepfake excuse had bought him immunity. "He is walking into the house," I said. "He is going to the study. He is going to sign the contract. Drive Eris," I ordered. The taxi engine roared to life. "We are not going to the woods," I said, my eyes fixed on the house on the hill. "We are going to the front door, and we are not using deepfakes. We are using the cold, hard truth of flesh and bone." Brad wants to talk about mental competence. Fine. Let us introduce him to Dr. Harris. Let us introduce him to the son he thinks is a cripple. And let us see if he can spin his way out of a room when the walls start closing in for real. The taxi peeled out of the alley. We were 5 minutes away. The final act was about to begin. And I promised myself one thing. When I walked through those doors, I would not be the victim. I would be the judgment. The taxi smelled of stale coffee and anticipation as we sped toward the estate. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. It was not the erratic fluttering of fear anymore. It was the heavy war drum of a man who knows he is about to fire the final shot. Dante sat next to me, checking the magazine of his pistol one last time before tucking it away. We were not going to use bullets today. We had something much more lethal. My burner phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from my cloud account. The account linked to the old cell phone number I had abandoned in the drainage ditch the night before. "You have one new voicemail," the automated voice said. I looked at the screen. The call had come in 10 minutes ago. It was from Tasha, my stepdaughter. The girl I had taken in when she was 6 years old. The girl whose father had walked out on her, leaving her with nothing but a plastic bag of clothes and a broken heart. I remembered the day I met her. She was hiding behind Bernice's legs, holding a dirty teddy bear. I had knelt down and promised her that she would never be hungry or unsafe again. I had kept that promise. I paid for her braces. I paid for her college. I walked her down the aisle toward Brad even though I knew he was a snake. I did it because I loved her. I pressed play on the speakerphone so Dante and Marcus could hear. Tasha S.'s voice filled the cab. It was thick with tears, trembling, heartbroken. Dad, please pick up. I know you are scared. I know you think we are against you, but we are not. Brad is just trying to help. We are so worried about Dante. Please, Dad, just come home. We can fix this. I love you so much. Oh, please. She sniffled loudly. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. If I had been the man I was 2 days ago, I might have believed it. I might have turned the car around. Then there was a pause, a rustling sound, like a phone being set down on a table but not hung up. Tasha thought she had ended the call. She did not know that the end call button on my old phone was sticky. It often required a second press. The sobbing stopped instantly. The silence stretched for 3 seconds, and then her voice came back. But it was not the voice of my daughter. It was the voice of a stranger. God, he is so stubborn. Why won't he just die already? I heard the sound of glass hitting a coaster. He is ruining everything. Tasha continued, her voice dripping with venom. If he does not show up to sign the papers or get declared dead by noon, the investors are going to pull out. I need that money, Brad. I have already put a deposit on the penthouse in Miami. Then I heard Brad's voice in the background. Relax, babe. The police will find him. And when they do, they will shoot first and ask questions later. Just keep leaving voicemails. We need a record of you being the concerned daughter for the probate court. Tasha laughed. A cold, sharp sound. I hope he is suffering out there. I hope he is cold. After all the years I had to pretend to listen to his boring stories about bridges and foundations, I deserve every penny. Just die, old man. Just die and set me free. The recording ended. The silence in the taxi was heavy enough to crush a man. I looked out the window at the passing city. I did not cry. I had shed my last tear for Tasha in the ventilation shaft the night before. When a beam is rotten, you do not try to paint over it. You cut it out. Dante looked at me, his eyes full of sorrow. Dad, I am so sorry. Do not be. I said, my voice flat. She made her choice. Now I make mine. I looked at the file on the phone. I could send this to the police, but Brad owned the police chief. I could send it to the news, but Brad had already spun the deepfake narrative. They would just say, I used AI to create this voicemail too. No. I needed a different kind of weapon. I needed someone who hated them as much as I did. Someone who had nothing to lose. I thought about Michael. Tasha's ex-husband, a good man, a mechanic who worked hard and loved his 2 children. Tasha had divorced him 3 years ago when she met Brad. With Brad's money and connections, they had destroyed Michael in court. They painted him as unfit. They took full custody of my grandchildren and limited Michael to supervised visits once a month. I knew it killed him. I knew he was fighting a losing battle to see his kids. And I knew he was currently in a legal hearing trying to get an emergency custody order because of the manhunt news. I scrolled through my contacts. Michael Mechanic. I attached the audio file. I added a short text message. She is not grieving Michael. She is celebrating. And she is in the house right now drinking champagne while your kids are upstairs with a nanny. Go get your children. I hit send. I tapped the screen on the tablet Marcus was holding. I pulled up the live feed from the camera I had installed in the chandelier the night before. The house was chaotic. Brad was pacing in the foyer, checking his watch. The investors were due to arrive in 20 minutes. Tasha was touching up her makeup in the hall mirror, checking her reflection for signs of stress. Then the doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a long, angry press. Brad frowned. He smoothed his suit jacket and walked to the door. He probably thought it was the first investor arriving early. He opened the door. Michael stood there. He was wearing his grease-stained work clothes. He looked like a storm cloud in human form. Where are they? Michael roared, pushing past Brad into the hallway. Brad stumbled back, surprised. Excuse me. You cannot be here. This is private property. Get out before I call the cops. Michael held up his phone, playing the recording of Tasha wishing for my death. The sound echoed off the marble walls of the foyer. You are a monster, Michael screamed, spotting Tasha. You are telling the court my kids are unsafe with me while you are wishing death on your own father. I am taking them. I am taking them now. Tasha turned pale. She dropped her compact mirror. It shattered on the floor. "You cannot take them!" she shrieked. "Brad, do something! He is trespassing!" Brad stepped between Michael and the stairs. He was desperate. The investors were coming. He could not have a domestic dispute in the middle of his signing ceremony. "Michael, listen to me," Brad said, holding up his hands. "You are upset. We can talk about this later. Here, take $500. Go get a drink." Michael slapped the money out of Brad's hand. "I do not want your dirty money. I want my kids." He tried to step around Brad, and that was when Brad snapped. The pressure of the last 24 hours, the failed murder plot, the missing body, the media circus, it all boiled over. Brad did not act like a financial advisor. He acted like a thug. He drew back his fist and punched Michael square in the jaw. It was a vicious blow. Michael stumbled back, crashing into the side table. A vase I had bought in Paris fell and smashed. "Get out of my house, you loser!" Brad screamed, his face purple with rage. "I own this town. I own the judge. I own the police. You are nothing." He kicked Michael while he was down. I watched it all on the tablet screen in the taxi. The camera in the chandelier captured every frame in high definition. The assault, the threat, the confession of corruption, and Tasha. Instead of helping her ex-husband, she started screaming at Brad. "You idiot," she yelled. "The investors will see the bruise. Why did you hit him? You are ruining everything." "I did this for you," Brad shouted back, turning on her. "You are the one who left the voicemail. You are the one who could not hang up a phone properly. This is your fault." "Shut up," Tasha screamed. "It is your fault for not killing Zeke when you had the chance. You said the cleaners would take care of it. You said he would be dead by now. The camera recorded that too." Michael scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from his lip. He looked at them both with pure disgust. He did not fight back. He did not need to. He saw the madness in their eyes. He backed out the door, pointing a shaking finger at them. "I am calling the police," he said. "And this time, Brad, they are not going to work for you." Michael ran down the driveway. Inside the house, the alliance was fracturing. Brad was hyperventilating, pacing in circles. Tasha was crying, rubbing her temples. "He is going to call the cops," Tasha sobbed. "They will be here during the signing." "Fix it," Brad yelled at her. "Go upstairs and clean yourself up. Put on a smile." If the investors asked, Michael was a drunk intruder. We defended ourselves. He grabbed a bottle of cleaning spray and started frantically wiping Michael's blood off the floor. I watched them turn on each other. The trust was gone. The unity was gone. They were just two rats in a sinking ship snapping at each other as the water rose. Dr. Aris slowed the taxi down. "We are here, Zeke." I looked up. We were at the bottom of the driveway. The black van of the cleaners was gone. The police barricade had been moved to the side to allow the investors' cars to enter. I saw Michael's truck speeding away in the other direction. He was going to the station. He would file a report. That would distract the corrupt police chief for at least 20 minutes. 20 minutes was all I needed. I checked my tie in the rearview mirror. I looked at Dante. He was not the broken boy in the wheelchair anymore. He was a man coming to claim his kingdom. "Let us go inside," I said, opening the car door. I grabbed the black file folder. I grabbed the tablet with the footage of the assault. Brad and Tasha were inside trying to glue their perfect life back together. They were wiping up blood and practicing their smiles. They thought the storm had passed. They did not know that the hurricane was just walking up the front steps. I walked toward the massive oak doors of my home, the doors I had carved myself. I did not knock. I still had my key. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. The sound of Judgment Day. The screen on the tablet flickered with the grainy green hue of night vision, but the image was sharp enough to break my heart. We were parked 3 blocks away in the shadow of an old oak tree, watching the interior of the home I had built with my own hands. My study, the sanctuary, where I had drafted blueprints for skyscrapers and planned my son's future, had been turned into a crime scene. Brad was pacing back and forth in front of my mahogany desk. He looked like a cornered animal. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the frantic energy of a man who knows the walls are closing in. The incident with Michael and the police report had rattled him. He knew he was running out of time. He needed to liquidate the asset before the sun came up and the courts opened. Sitting in my leather chair was a man I did not recognize. He was thin, with pale skin and long fingers that moved with the precision of a surgeon. He had a magnifying glass in one eye and an array of fountain pens spread out on the blotter. This was the forger. Tasha was standing by the window, peering through the curtains as if she expected the FBI to rappel down the chimney. She held a glass of scotch, my scotch, in a hand that trembled slightly. "Are you sure about this, Brad?" she asked, her voice tinny through the microphone I had hidden in the power outlet. "If the bank verifies the signature and it does not match, we go to prison for 20 years. This is federal fraud." Brad stopped pacing and slammed his hands down on the desk. "The bank is not going to verify it, Tasha, because we are not using a bank." He gestured to the open laptop on the desk. "I found a buyer, a private equity group out of Russia. They do not care about title insurance. They do not care about probate court. They have $50 million of dirty cash they need to wash, and real estate is the best laundry machine in the world. They are buying the property for cash at 60 cents on the dollar." Tasha gasped. 60 cents. "That is robbery. The house is worth double that. It is worth zero if Zeke shows up," Brad snapped. "It is worth zero if the police freeze the assets. These Russians will wire the money the second I hand them the deed with the old man's signature on it. They get a cheap asset, we get $3 million in an offshore account, and we disappear to Brazil before anyone realizes what happened." I watched from the darkness of the car, feeling a cold knot of rage tighten in my stomach. They were not just stealing my home, they were selling it to criminals. They were laundering money through the legacy I intended to leave for my son. The man in the chair cleared his throat. It was a dry, dusty sound. "I need silence," he said. His voice was soft but commanding. Brad shut his mouth instantly. The forger picked up a piece of paper. It was a letter I had written to Tasha for her graduation 10 years ago. Brad must have dug it out of her keepsake box. The man studied my handwriting. He studied the loop of the Z in Zeke. He studied the heavy pressure I put on the downstroke of the T in Thorn. He dipped a vintage fountain pen into a bottle of black ink. "You said he had a tremor," the forger asked, not looking up. Brad shook his head. "No. We are backdating this deed to 3 years ago, before the diagnosis. It needs to look like the signature of a strong, healthy man. We are claiming he transferred the property to the trust before he got sick." The forger nodded. He lowered the pen to the paper. I held my breath. I watched a stranger's hand mimic the movements I had made thousands of times. I watched him steal my name. He moved the pen with a fluid, graceful rhythm. Scratch, scratch, swoosh. He lifted the pen and held the paper up to the light. Brad leaned in, his eyes wide with greed. "It is perfect," the forger said, sliding the paper across the desk. Brad snatched it up. He pulled out his own magnifying glass. He compared it to the original letter. A slow, twisted smile spread across his face. "My God," Brad whispered. "It is better than the real thing. It even has the hesitation on the R that he always does." That hesitation was because I broke my wrist on a construction site in 1985. It was a scar in my handwriting, a memory of pain and hard work, and this criminal had copied it like it was a parlor trick. "Sign the deed," Brad ordered, pushing the official document forward. The forger signed. Once, twice, 3 times, the deed, the transfer of power, the waiving of rights. With every stroke of that pen, I felt a part of myself being erased. Legally, I was becoming a ghost. In the eyes of the law, I had given everything away 3 years ago. Brad picked up the documents and blew on the wet ink. "Done," he said. He looked at Tasha. "Pack your bags. The buyers are coming at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We sign the final exchange in front of the notary I bribed, hand over the deed, and the money hits the account by noon. By dinner time, we will be on a flight to Rio." Tasha smiled, a weak, relieved smile. "And what about Zeke?" Brad laughed. He walked over to the fireplace and threw the practice sheets into the flames. "Who cares? Let him rot in the woods. Once the Russians own this place, he is their problem. And trust me, Tasha, you do not want to be a trespasser when the new owners move in. They do not call the police. They call a cleanup crew that actually works." The feed on the tablet went black for a second as the camera adjusted to the sudden flare of the fire. I sat back in the seat, letting out a breath I did not know I was holding. Beside me, Dante was vibrating with intensity. He was not looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at me. "They are selling us out to the mob, Dad," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "If that deal goes through tomorrow, if those men take possession, we never get the house back. We can sue Brad, but the house will be gone." I looked at my hands. The hands that Brad said were too shaky to sign a check. They were steady now. They were fists. I thought about the police. If we called them now and told them about the forgery, they would ask for proof. We had the video, but Brad would claim it was another deepfake. He would claim we manipulated the footage. He would stall. And while he stalled, the wire transfer would happen. The system was too slow. Justice was too slow. We needed something faster. We needed a demolition crew. I looked at the time. It was 3 a.m. The sun would rise in 3 hours. "Dante," I said, turning to my son. He looked at me, ready for orders. "Do you remember when you were 10 years old and some bullies stole your bike?" I asked. Dante frowned, confused by the question. "Yeah. You told me to go tell the teacher. And what happened?" "The teacher did nothing," Dante said bitterly. "She said she didn't see it happen. The bullies kept the bike and laughed at me for weeks." "Exactly," I said. "I gave you bad advice that day, son. I tried to teach you to trust the system. I tried to teach you to be civilized. But there are men in this world like Brad, like those Russians who do not speak the language of civilization. They only speak the language of force." I reached into the back seat and grabbed the suit Marcus had brought for me. I grabbed the tie. I grabbed my old hard hat that was sitting on the floorboard of the taxi, a relic from my days as a foreman. "I am not calling the teacher this time," I said. Dante saw the look in my eyes. It was a look he hadn't seen since before the accident. It was the look of the man who could stare down a union strike and make steel bend to his will. "What are we doing?" Dante asked, a slow smile forming on his lips. Zeke looked at the house one last time. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Brad is going to try to sell a lie," I said. "He thinks he is the smartest man in the room. He thinks he has written the ending to this story." I opened the car door and stepped out into the cool night air. I stood up straight, stretching my back, feeling the strength return to my bones. "Tomorrow is the day we return," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the empty street. "No more hiding in dumpsters. No more crawling through vents. No more pretending to be weak." I pointed at the front door of the mansion. "We are going to walk through that front door. You are going to walk on your own 2 feet, and I am going to walk in as the owner of this estate. We are going to look that forger in the eye. We are going to look those buyers in the eye, and we are going to show them that the signature of Isaiah Thorne cannot be forged because the man behind it is standing right in front of them." Dante stepped out beside me. He stood tall, matching my height. "We crash the party," he said. "We do not just crash it, son," I said, closing the car door with a definitive slam. "We are the eviction notice. Get some sleep. We have a suit to press and a war to win." The heavy oak doors of my home felt cold under my fingertips as I pushed the key into the lock. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of expensive cologne and the metallic tang of betrayal. I could hear them in the living room, the murmur of voices, the clinking of crystal glasses, the sound of a pen scratching against paper. They were selling my life piece by piece, and they were toasting to their success while they did it. I signaled to Marcus. He nodded solemnly and adjusted his tie. Behind him stood the police chief, a man named Miller, who had spent too many weekends on Brad S. boat drinking beer paid for with my money. But today, Miller was not here for a party. He was here because Marcus had filed an emergency motion at dawn, accompanied by a court-appointed observer. They were here to witness the execution of a warrant. Brad thought the warrant was for me. He was about to learn that justice is a double-edged sword. I sat down in the wheelchair we had brought from the warehouse. It was old and rusted. The wheels squeaked with every rotation. I slumped my shoulders. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I made my hands tremble in my lap. I had to become the thing they said I was. I had to become the broken old man, the senile bird and the vegetable. It was the hardest role I ever played, but I played it for the audience waiting inside. Marcus pushed the door open. The sound of the heavy wood swinging back on its hinges silenced the room instantly. We rolled into the foyer. The living room was straight ahead. I saw them frozen in a tableau of greed. Brad was standing at the head of the table, a pen in his hand. Bernice was seated next to him, looking pale and anxious. Tasha was pouring coffee for 3 men in dark suits who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. The forger was gone, replaced by a notary public who looked nervous. Brad looked up. His eyes went wide. For a second I saw fear, genuine primal fear. He dropped the pen. It rolled across the deed, leaving a black smudge on the paper. But then he saw the wheelchair. He saw my slumped head. He saw the police chief standing behind me. The fear vanished, replaced by a smug, triumphant grin that made my stomach turn. He thought he had won. He thought the police had caught the fugitive. Officer Miller Brad boomed, stepping forward with his arms spread wide. "Thank God. You found him. We were so worried." He walked toward us, ignoring me completely and addressing the chief. "Is he sedated?" Brad asked, his voice dripping with fake concern. "He looks out of it." "Did he hurt anyone?" "Where is my brother-in-law?" "Is Dante safe?" Chief Miller cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "Mr. Thorne is right here, Brad," the chief said, gesturing to the chair. "We found him coming up the driveway." Brad shook his head, letting out a long, dramatic sigh. He turned to the Russian buyers who were watching with stony expressions. "I apologize for this interruption, gentlemen," Brad said smoothly. "As I explained, my father-in-law suffers from severe advanced dementia. He wanders off. He gets confused. It is a tragedy, really, but we are handling it." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. The conservatorship order, the medical evaluation from Dr. Steinberg, the lies he had paid for. "Officer Miller, here are the court orders," Brad said, thrusting the papers at the police chief. "As you can see, I am his legal guardian. I have full power of attorney. This man is a danger to himself. Please take him into custody immediately. Transport him to the state facility as we discussed. I will sign the admission papers later today." He looked down at me. His eyes were cold, dead things. "It is for your own good, Zeke," he said softly, so only I could hear. "You are going to a place where you cannot hurt anyone anymore, especially my bank account." I did not look up. I let a little drool escape the corner of my mouth. I kept my hands shaking. I waited. "Take him away," Brad ordered, waving his hand dismissively. "And find Dante." He must be terrified. The poor boy cannot even feed himself, let alone survive a night in the woods with a madman. That was the cue. Brad had just described my son to a room full of witnesses, including a court official and 3 foreign investors, as a helpless invalid. He had staked his credibility on that fact. I heard the front door open again. It was not a slam. It was a slow, deliberate opening. Then came the sound. Clack, clack, clack. It was the sound of hard leather soles hitting the marble floor of the foyer. Heavy, rhythmic, confident footsteps. The room went silent. The Russians looked toward the hallway. Bernice stopped breathing. Tasha dropped the coffee pot. It shattered on the floor, sending hot liquid and glass flying everywhere, but nobody moved. Nobody looked at the mess. Everyone was looking at the man standing in the archway. It was not the Dante they knew. It was not the boy in the sweatpants and the stained t-shirt slumped in a chair. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him perfectly. His shoulders were broad and pulled back. His tie was a deep crimson silk. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, towering over everyone in the room. He was not leaning on a cane. He was not holding onto the wall. He was standing on his own 2 feet, planted firmly on the ground like a steel column. Dante walked into the room. He did not walk with a limp. He walked with the power of a man who had spent 6 months training for this exact moment. He walked with the rage of a son who had watched his father be poisoned. He walked with the authority of the true owner of this house. Brad staggered back. He bumped into the table, knocking over a vase. His face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. Tasha let out a scream. It was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of disbelief. It was the sound of a woman watching a ghost walk out of a grave. "He is walking!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at him. "He is walking!" Bernice covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes bulging. She looked from Dante to me and back again. She realized in that second that everything she knew was a lie. Dante stopped in the middle of the room. He looked at the Russian buyers. "Gentlemen," Dante said, his voice deep and resonant, filling the space without effort, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding." He pointed at Brad, who was now trembling so hard he had to lean on the table for support. "This man does not have the authority to sell this house." Brad found his voice. It was a high-pitched squeak. "He is lying." Brad stammered, looking frantically at the police chief. He is faking it. It is a trick. It is adrenaline. Arrest him too. He is an accomplice." Dante laughed. It was a cold, dry laugh that sounded exactly like mine. "Faking it?" Dante asked. He took 2 steps toward Brad. Brad flinched as if he expected to be hit. "You told the police I was a hostage," Dante said. "You told the court I was an invalid. You told these buyers I was a dependent who needed the proceeds of this sale for medical care." Dante turned to the court official, a stern woman with a notepad who was writing furiously. "Does this look like a man who needs a guardian, ma'am?" The woman shook her head slowly, staring at Dante with awe. "No, sir. It does not." Brad lunged for the papers on the table. The deed. The forged document. He tried to grab it to hide it, to tear it up. I stopped shaking. I lifted my head. The drool was gone. The confusion was gone. I sat up straight in the wheelchair, my eyes locking onto Brad S. with the intensity of a laser. "Do not touch that paper, Brad," I said. My voice was not weak. It was the voice that had commanded construction crews on skyscrapers. It was the voice of the foreman. Brad froze. He looked at me. He saw the clarity in my eyes. He saw the intelligence. He saw the trap. "You," Brad whispered, "you are not sick." I stood up. I gripped the armrests of the wheelchair and pushed myself up. My knees popped, but I stood. I stood next to my son. Two Thorn men standing side by side in the house we built. "No, Brad," I said, stepping out of the chair and kicking it away. It rolled across the room and crashed into the wall. I was never sick. I was poisoned. By your wife. And by you. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the USB drive and the black file folder. And we have the video to prove it. The Russian stood up. The lead buyer looked at Brad with disgust. He said something in Russian that sounded like a curse, spat on the floor, and walked out. The other two followed him. The money was gone. The deal was dead. Brad was alone. He looked at Tasha, but she was backing away, shaking her head. He looked at Bernice, but she was sobbing into her hands. He looked at the police chief, but Miller was not smiling anymore. Miller was reaching for the handcuffs on his belt. "You played a good game, Brad," I said, walking toward him until I was inches from his face. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sweat and cheap ambition. "You bet against the wrong foundation. You thought you could tear this house down because it was old. You forgot that old does not mean weak. Old means tested. Old means reinforced." I looked at Dante. "Show him the door, son." Dante smiled. But before we could throw them out, Tasha made one last desperate move. She lunged for the table, not for the deed, but for the gun Brad had hidden in his briefcase. The silence in the room was brittle like glass waiting to shatter. Brad stood by the mahogany table, his chest heaving, his face a mask of panic that was slowly hardening into desperation. He looked at Dante, standing tall and strong in his suit. He looked at me, standing beside my wheelchair. And then he looked at the police chief, who was unbuttoning the strap on his holster. Brad did what rats always do when they are cornered. He tried to bite. "This is a miracle," Brad stammered, his voice rising in pitch. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. "Look at this, everyone. It is a medical miracle. My prayers have been answered. Dante can walk. Praise God." He spread his hands wide, playing to an audience that had already stopped clapping. But he pivoted. He turned to the police chief, his eyes wide and frantic. "But Officer Miller, this does not change the facts. Physical recovery does not mean mental stability. Look at Zeke. Look at his eyes. He is manic. He is having an episode right now. Just because he can stand up does not mean he is not dangerous. He kidnapped my brother-in-law. He has been running around the city with a gun. He is sick. He needs help. He needs to be institutionalized before he hurts someone." I watched him spin his web. It was impressive in a sickening way. He was trying to use my strength against me. He was trying to paint my clarity as mania. I did not shout. I did not argue. I did not give him the satisfaction of a debate. I simply nodded to Marcus. My old friend Marcus Vance stepped forward. He did not look like a high-priced corporate lawyer. He looked like a tired brawler in a rumpled suit. He was holding a laptop in one hand and a HDMI cable in the other. He walked over to the massive 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. It was a television Brad had bought with my money. He had bragged about the resolution. He had bragged about the clarity. Now he was going to see exactly how clear it was. Marcus plugged the cable into the side of the laptop. The screen flickered to life. "What are you doing?" Brad snapped, stepping forward. "You cannot just come in here and hijack my equipment. This is private property. It is evidence, Brad," I said, my voice low and steady. "And since you claim I am crazy, I think it is time we let the house speak for itself." Marcus hit the spacebar. The first video filled the screen. It was footage from the kitchen taken from the hidden camera I had installed in the vent. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner. 7 a.m., 3 days ago. The image was crisp. It showed Bernice, my wife of 20 years, standing at the granite island. She was wearing her silk morning robe. She looked beautiful. She looked kind. But then she reached into her pocket. The room watched in horrified silence as she pulled out a small, unmarked vial. She looked over her shoulder, checking the door. Then, with a steady, practiced hand, she tipped the vial over my favorite mug. A pinch of white powder fell into the steaming black coffee. She stirred it. She smiled. A small, cold smile that never reached her eyes. Then the audio kicked in. "Drink up, old man." Bernice's voice rang out from the speakers, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Just a little more arsenic to keep the shakes going. I cannot wait until your heart finally stops beating. You are taking too long to die." Bernice let out a strangled cry. She covered her mouth with both hands, her knees buckling. She collapsed onto the sofa she had been so proud of, sobbing into the cushions. Brad stared at the screen, his mouth open. He looked at Bernice with pure hatred, not because she did it, but because she got caught. I looked at the police chief. His hand was now resting firmly on his gun. He was not looking at me anymore. He was staring at the woman on the couch. But we were not done. Marcus hit the next key. The screen changed. Now it was the study, my sanctuary. The timestamp was last night. The camera angle was from the chandelier looking down on Brad and Tasha. The room was a wreck, torn apart in their search for my money. Brad was pacing. He was holding a glass of scotch. "We launder it through the real estate," Brad's voice boomed through the room. It was loud. It was clear. There was no denying it. "The Russians are bringing cash." Brad continued on the screen. "Dirty money from the syndicate. We sell them the house for 60 cents on the dollar. They get a clean asset. We get $3 million in the Cayman accounts. By the time the IRS figures it out, we will be sipping mojitos in Rio. And the best part, they are going to bulldoze the house. They are going to flatten it. Every piece of evidence of what we did to Zeke will be buried under a parking lot." I heard a sharp intake of breath from the Russian buyers standing near the door. The lead buyer, the man in the expensive suit, turned pale. He understood English perfectly well. He just heard himself being implicated in a federal money laundering scheme on a recording that was being watched by the chief of police. Brad looked at the Russians. He held up his hands. That is out of context," he stammered. "That is a deep fake. It is AI. Zeke manipulated it." Marcus did not pause. He hit the final key. The screen changed again. This time it was just audio accompanied by a waveform visual. But everyone recognized the voice. It was Tasha. My daughter. The timestamp showed it was the voicemail she had left me just hours ago. "Why won't he just die already, Tasha's voice shrieked, filling the room with her venom. "He is ruining everything. If he does not show up to sign the papers or get declared dead by noon, I lose the penthouse. Just die, old man. Just die and set me free." Tasha stood by the window, frozen. She looked like a statue of salt. She did not cry. She did not deny it. She just stared at the screen, stripped naked of her pretenses. She was not the grieving daughter. She was a vulture who was angry the carcass was still moving. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the weight of truth. I looked at Brad. He was not standing tall anymore. He was shrinking. He looked small. He looked like exactly what he was, a thief in a suit. "Deepfake?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. "Is that what you are going to tell the jury, Brad? Is that what you are going to tell the FBI when they analyze the metadata on those files?" Brad looked around the room. He looked at the chief. He looked at the court official who was now writing so fast her pen was a blur. He looked at the Russians. And that was when the panic truly set in. The lead Russian buyer muttered something in his native tongue. It sounded like a curse. He buttoned his jacket and turned to the door. "We are leaving," he said, his accent thick. "We have no business here. This is a domestic matter." He motioned to his associates. They moved as a unit, heading for the exit. They were cutting their losses. They wanted to be on a plane back to Moscow before the handcuffs came out. But they forgot one thing. I had built this house, and I had secured it. Chief Miller stepped in front of the double doors. He was a big man. He blocked the exit completely. "Nobody leaves," Miller said, his voice hard. The Russian stopped. He glared at the chief. We have diplomatic immunity, he lied. You have a confession on tape, Miller corrected. You are accessories to fraud, money laundering, and attempted murder. Step back. The Russian looked at his bodyguards. For a second I thought there was going to be a shootout. I saw Dante tense up his hand, drifting toward his jacket where his pistol was hidden. But the Russian was a businessman. He knew when a deal had gone bad. He raised his hands slowly and stepped back. Brad, seeing his escape route blocked, let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. "You cannot do this to me!" he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I am a respected financial advisor. I am a pillar of this community. You are a senile old man. Nobody will believe you over me." I rolled my wheelchair forward just a few inches. Then I remembered. I did not need the chair. I stepped forward. 1 step, 2 steps. I walked right up to him until I was looking down into his sweating face. "I am not senile, Brad," I said, "and I am not alone." I pointed to the camera in the chandelier. The red light was still blinking. "We are live," I whispered. Brad looked up. He saw the light. "I streamed this entire meeting to the cloud," I said, "and to the email inbox of the district attorney, and to the local news station." Brad's knees gave out. He did not fall gracefully. He crumpled. He slid down to the floor, his expensive suit bunching up around him, his head in his hands. "It is over, Brad," I said, looking down at him with zero pity. "You bet against the wrong man. You thought you could dismantle my life like it was just bricks and mortar, but you forgot that the strongest part of a building is the part you cannot see, the foundation." I turned to the chief. "Get this trash out of my house, Miller." Miller nodded. He pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, send backup. I have 5 subjects in custody. Charges include attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy." Tasha started screaming then. She ran toward me, grabbing my arm. "Dad, please." I did not mean it. It was Brad. He forced me. He made me say those things. "I love you, Daddy. Please do not let them take me." I looked at her hand on my sleeve, the same hand that had poured wine while she waited for me to die. I gently removed her hand. "I do not have a daughter." I said, my voice flat and final. "My daughter died the day she decided my life was worth less than a condo in Miami." I turned my back on her screams. I walked over to Dante. He was standing by the window watching the police cars swarm up the driveway. He put his arm around my shoulder. "We did it, Dad," he said softly. "We are not done yet, son," I said, watching the flashing lights. "Now we have to clean up the mess." I looked around the room at the shattered glass, the spilled coffee, the broken people. But first I said, "I think I will have a cup of coffee, a fresh cup, made by my own hands." Brad was on his knees, but he was not praying. He was scrambling. He was a man drowning in deep water who still believed he could command the ocean to stop moving. He looked at the police chief, then at the Russians who were being detained at the door, and finally at me. He did not see a father-in-law. He saw an obstacle. And Brad had spent his entire life removing obstacles with a checkbook or a lawyer. He stood up. He smoothed his suit jacket, trying to regain the dignity that had just been stripped from him. He pointed a finger at Chief Miller. "You are making a mistake, Miller. A massive lawsuit-level mistake." Brad's voice was shaking, but it was loud. It was the voice of a man who was used to being obeyed. A white man in a 3-piece suit who knew that the system was built for people like him, not for people like me. "I have the papers," Brad screamed, reaching into his briefcase. He pulled out the court order he had obtained just 24 hours ago. "Look at this. I am the legal guardian. I have power of attorney over Zeke Thorne. The court declared him incompetent. That order is signed by a judge. It is still valid. Until a judge overturns this, I am in charge of this estate, and I am in charge of him." He turned to me, his eyes full of venom. "Sit down, Zeke. You are having an episode. You are confused." He looked at the officers. "Arrest him. If you do not arrest him, you are violating a court order. I will have your badges. I will sue this entire department into bankruptcy. I am the guardian here." The room went quiet. Brad was right about one thing. The law is a machine, and once it starts grinding, it is hard to stop. The police chief hesitated. He looked at the paper in Brad's hand. It was a valid order. Technically, until a judge said otherwise, I was a ward of the state and Brad was my keeper. Brad saw the hesitation. He smiled. It was a sharkish smile. "See," he sneered. "You cannot touch me. I am the law here." I looked at him. I looked at the paper he was waving like a shield. Then I did something I had not done in front of him for 3 years. I locked the brakes on the wheelchair. I placed my hands on the armrests, and I pushed. My triceps, which had lifted steel beams for 40 years, flexed. My legs, which he said were atrophied, found purchase on the hardwood floor. I stood up. I did not stand up quickly. I stood up slowly, unfolding my 6-foot frame like a drawbridge rising. I stood until I was looking down at him. I stood until the shadow of my body fell across his face. The silence in the room was absolute. Tasha stopped crying. The Russian stopped whispering. Even Brad stopped breathing. "I am not confused, Brad," I said. My voice was low. It rumbled in my chest like a subway train. "And I am not incompetent." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I did not pull out a gun. I did not pull out a phone. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not crisp and white like the documents Brad had. It was yellowed. The edges were frayed. It smelled of old filing cabinets and the year 1980. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, holding it up. Brad stared at it. "It is the original land purchase agreement," I said. "Dated October 14th, 1980. I took a step toward him. He took a step back. "You think you know the law, Brad. You think you know loopholes. But you missed the most important one. You missed the foundation." I handed the paper to Marcus. "Read Clause 17, I ordered. Marcus adjusted his glasses. He looked at the paper. A smile spread across his face. A smile that was all teeth. Clause 17. Marcus read aloud, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "This property is designated under the Historical Homestead Act of 1975. As a protected family heritage site, the title cannot be transferred, sold, or leveraged without the wet ink signatures of the original owner and all living biological issue." Marcus looked up. "Biological issue, Brad. Do you know what that means?" Brad blinked. He looked at Tasha. "It means biological children," I said. "My blood." I looked at Tasha. She was shrinking against the wall, trying to make herself invisible. "Tasha is my daughter in my heart," I said, my voice steady. "I raised her. I fed her. I loved her. But she is not my blood. Her father was a man who left her when she was 6. Legally, under this deed, she has no claim to this land. She never did. Her signature on any sale document is worthless." I turned back to Brad. "So, for you to sell this house, for you to sell it to these Russians, you needed the signature of my only living biological child." I pointed to Dante. "My son." Brad's face turned the color of ash. He looked at the forged deed on the table. The deed he was about to hand over to the buyers. But I have it," Brad stammered. "I have Dante's signature. He signed it. I have the document right here." He grabbed the deed. He held it up. There, at the bottom, next to my forged signature, was Dante's name. Dante stepped forward. He walked with the heavy, confident stride of a man who owns the ground he walks on. He walked up to Brad. He looked at the paper. He laughed. "That is funny," Dante said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his driver's license. He held it up next to the deed. "Because that is not how I sign my name." He looked at the chief. "Chief Miller, look at the loop on the D. Look at the slant of the T." Miller stepped closer. He compared the two signatures. "They are not even close," Miller said. Dante looked at Brad. "You forged my father's name," Dante said. "We saw you do it. And then you forged mine. You thought I was a cripple who could not hold a pen. You thought I was brain dead. So you signed for me." Brad dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing next to his polished shoes. "That is forgery, Brad," Dante said. "That is fraud. And since you tried to wire the money across state lines, it is federal wire fraud." Brad looked around the room. The walls were closing in. The loop was tightening. "But I was acting as his guardian," Brad whispered, his voice cracking. "I have the power of attorney. I can sign for him." "Not for this," I said, stepping closer. "Not for a homestead property. The clause is specific, Brad. The signature must be from the biological heir, in person. No guardians, no proxies, no lawyers." I leaned in close. "You built your entire scheme on a lie, Brad. You thought you could bypass the rules because you thought we were too stupid to read the fine print. You thought an old black man from the South Side didn't know how to protect his legacy." I tapped the yellowed paper in Marcus's hand. "I wrote this clause, Brad. I had a lawyer draft it 40 years ago because I knew that someday someone like you would come along, someone who wanted to take what I built. I put a poison pill in the foundation of this house before you were even born." Brad looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time. He did not see a victim. He saw the architect of his destruction. He lunged. It was a desperate, pathetic move. He tried to run for the back door. He pushed Tasha aside, knocking her into the wall. He scrambled toward the patio, but he forgot one thing. I had built the patio doors too, and I had installed the locking mechanism myself. He hit the glass and bounced off. The doors were locked. Chief Miller did not run. He just walked over. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked. Brad Thorne. Miller said, spinning him around, "You are under arrest." Brad started to cry. He sobbed loud, ugly, heaving sobs. "Tasha, I did it for us," he wailed. I looked at Tasha. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the floor. She knew it was over. I looked at the Russians. "Get out of my house," I said. They did not argue. They filed out past the police, leaving their briefcase of dirty money behind. I looked at Dante. My son. My blood. The only signature that mattered. He put his hand on my shoulder. "It is done, Dad," he said. I looked at the yellowed paper in Marcus's hand. The paper that had saved us. "It is never done, son," I said, watching them drag Brad away. "You have to maintain the foundation every single day, or the rot sets in again." But for today it was enough. The house was still standing, and so were we. The silence that followed Brad's removal was heavier than concrete. The room was still vibrating with the echoes of his desperate screams, but now the air had shifted. The focus of the room turned like a spotlight onto the only person left standing in the wreckage of the conspiracy. Bernice. My wife of 20 years stood alone near the fireplace. She looked small. She looked fragile. For a moment, the light catching the tears on her cheeks made her look like the woman I had married 2 decades ago. The woman who had sworn to love and cherish me in sickness and in health. But that was just a trick of the light. I blinked, and the illusion shattered. I did not see a wife. I saw a structural failure in a human form. She looked at the door where Brad had been dragged out. Then she looked at the empty space where the Russian money had been. And finally, she looked at me. She did not run for the door. She knew the police chief was blocking it. She did not run for the window. She knew Dante was watching her every move, so she ran to the only sanctuary she had ever known. She ran to me. She threw herself across the room, moving faster than I had seen her move in years. She collapsed at my feet, wrapping her arms around my legs, burying her face in the fabric of my trousers. The same trousers she had ironed for me just last week, while plotting my death. "Zeke," she sobbed, her voice muffled and wet. "Oh God, Zeke, thank you. Thank you for saving me." I looked down at the top of her head. I smelled her perfume. Lavender and vanilla. It was the scent of my home. It was the scent of my pillow. For years that smell had meant safety. Now it smelled like arsenic. I did not move. I stood as rigid as a steel column. I did not reach down to comfort her. I did not stroke her hair. I let her weep. I let her perform. It was Brad, she wailed, looking up at me with eyes that were red and swollen. It was all him, Zeke. He forced me. He is a monster. He threatened me. He said if I did not help him get your money, he would hurt Tasha. He said he would hurt you. I was so scared. I did not know what to do. She gripped my hand, trying to pull it toward her face, trying to kiss my knuckles. I had to play along, Zeke. Do not you see? I was trying to buy time. I was trying to protect you. I never wanted to hurt you. You are my husband. You are the love of my life. The room watched in stunned silence. Even the police officers looked uncomfortable. It was a masterful performance. If I had not seen the video, if I had not heard the joy in her voice when she spiked my coffee, I might have faltered. I might have wondered if she was truly a victim. But I had seen the tape. I pulled my hand away from her grip. It was not a violent motion. It was a dismissal. I brushed my sleeve as if she had left a stain. "Stand up, Bernice," I said. My voice was not loud. It did not echo. It was quiet and flat, like the sound of a shovel hitting hard earth. She froze. She looked at my face, searching for a trace of the man who used to bring her flowers every Friday. Searching for the soft-hearted fool she thought she had married. "Zeke, please," she whispered. "Do not look at me like that. I am your Bernice." "You are not my Bernice," I said. "My Bernice died a long time ago. The woman on the floor is a stranger who tried to murder me for a condo in Miami." I took a step back, breaking the contact completely. "You say he forced you?" I asked. "You say you were scared?" "Yes," she nodded, frantically wiping her eyes. "He is violent, Zeke. You saw him hit Michael. He terrified me." I looked at Marcus. "Play the video again, Marcus. The kitchen scene." No, Bernice screamed. No, please do not. Play it, I ordered. Marcus hit the key. The massive television screen came to life again. The image of Bernice in her silk robe filled the room. We watched her pull the vial from her pocket. We watched her tip the powder into my mug. But this time I pointed at the screen. Look at your face, Bernice, I said. On the screen, the digital Bernice was smiling. It was not a nervous smile. It was not a fearful smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated malice. She hummed a little tune as she stirred the poison. She did a little dance step as she walked to the fridge. Does that look like a woman who is terrified? I asked the room. Does that look like a hostage? I turned back to her. You were not scared, Bernice. You were impatient. You said it yourself on the tape. I was taking too long to die. Bernice scrambled to her feet. The mask of the victim fell away, revealing the ugly, desperate reality underneath. I took care of you, she hissed, her voice changing instantly from pleading to venomous. For 20 years I washed your clothes. I cooked your meals. I listened to your boring stories about concrete and rebar. I wasted my youth in this house, Zeke. I deserved that money. I earned it. There it is, I said. The truth. Finally. I looked at her with a clarity that hurt. I saw every line on her face, every lie she had ever told me. You are right about one thing, Bernice, I said. You said I was old. You said I was forgetful. You told the doctors I was confused. I stepped closer to her, towering over her just as Dante had towered over Brad. But my memory is excellent, Bernice. I remember everything. I remember the day we met. I remember the day I paid off your debts. And I remember a conversation we had last month. She stared at me, her chest heaving. You told me you wanted to travel, I said. You were complaining about the winter. You said you wanted to go on a long trip. You said you wanted to go somewhere where you didn't have to cook or clean or take care of an old man. I looked at Chief Miller. Chief, I believe you have a destination in mind for my wife. Miller stepped forward, pulling a second pair of handcuffs from his belt. Mrs. Thorne, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Isaiah Thorne, he said. Bernice backed away, knocking over a chair. You cannot prove it, she shrieked. That video is not enough. You have no physical evidence. It is just powder. It could be sugar. It could be creamer. You cannot arrest me for making coffee. She was fighting to the bitter end. She knew the law. She knew that without the actual poison, the video could be argued away by a good defense attorney. She needed the physical substance to be missing. I looked at Dante. Dante knew the kitchen better than anyone. He had spent 8 years sitting in there watching her cook while he was trapped in his chair. He saw things she thought were invisible. Check the spice rack, Dante, I said. Top shelf, behind the saffron. She knows I never use saffron. It is too expensive. Bernice's face went white. It was the color of fresh sheetrock. Dante walked to the open kitchen, which was visible from the living room. He moved with purpose. He reached up to the high cabinet, the one Bernice thought was out of reach for a cripple and an old man. He pushed aside the red tin of saffron. He pulled out a small glass jar. It was unlabeled. It was half full of a fine white crystalline powder. Dante walked back into the living room. He handed the jar to the police chief. Arsenic is heavy, I said, watching the jar. And it is stable. It does not degrade, just like the greed in your heart, Bernice. Chief Miller held the jar up to the light. He looked at Bernice. You have the right to remain silent, he said, snapping the cuffs onto her wrists. The sound of the metal clicking shut was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was better than the applause at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was the sound of a structure being condemned. Bernice did not go quietly. As the officers took her arms, she began to scream. She did not scream for mercy this time. She screamed insults. She screamed curses. She called me a senile old fool. She called Dante a cripple. She spewed 20 years of hidden hatred into the air, contaminating the room one last time. I take it back, Zeke, she spat as they dragged her toward the door. I should have used more poison. I should have finished you off years ago. I watched her go. I watched the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had planned to grow old with, being hauled out of my house like a bag of trash. When the door slammed shut, the silence returned, but this time it was not heavy. It was clean. It was empty. I looked at Dante. He was standing by the fireplace holding the jar of poison the police had bagged as evidence. Are you okay, Dad? He asked softly. I looked around the room. I looked at the overturned chairs. I looked at the shattered glass. I looked at the empty space where my marriage had been. I am an engineer, son, I said. I know that sometimes before you can build something new, you have to clear the site, you have to remove the debris, you have to dig down to the bedrock. I walked over to the window and watched the police car drive away with my wife in the back seat. She got her trip, I said quietly. It is a long drive to the state penitentiary, and the view from the cell is terrible. I turned back to my son. Now let us get a broom. We have work to do. The house was finally clearing out, but the air still felt heavy with the residue of their greed. Bernice was gone, taken away in the back of a cruiser, her screams fading into the morning traffic. Now it was time for the architects of this disaster to face the wreckage they had created. I turned my attention to Tasha. My stepdaughter was huddled in the corner near the grand piano she had never learned to play. She was not screaming anymore. She was trembling, shaking so hard that her teeth chattered. She looked at me with the eyes of a trapped animal. She saw the handcuffs on the police chief's belt, and she knew there was no escape. She tried one last time. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, trying to summon the ghost of the arrogant woman who had laughed at my death on a voicemail just hours ago. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You cannot let them take me. I am your little girl. Remember the bike you bought me. Remember the graduation party. You promised to protect me." I looked at her. I looked at the face of the child I had raised, the woman I had walked down the aisle. And then I remembered the sound of her voice on the tape, wishing I would die so she could buy a penthouse. "I did protect you, Tasha," I said, my voice low and steady. "I protected you from hunger. I protected you from the cold. I protected you from the world for 30 years. But I cannot protect you from your own soul." I nodded to Officer Miller. "Tasha Thorne," I said, speaking to the room like a judge passing sentence. "You are not being arrested for being a bad daughter. That is not a crime. You are being arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud, for elder abuse, and for being an accessory to attempted murder." "Elder abuse?" Tasha gasped, recoiling as if I had slapped her. "I never touched you. You did not have to hit me to abuse me," I said, stepping closer. "You isolated me. You helped them gaslight me. You stole my dignity. You treated a human being like a broken appliance that you wanted to throw in the trash. That is abuse, Tasha, and in this state it carries a mandatory prison sentence." Miller stepped forward. He did not be gentle. He spun her around and pulled her arms behind her back. "Ow, you are hurting me," she whined. "You will get used to it," I said coldly. As the metal cuffs clicked shut, Tasha began to sob. It was a pathetic sound, the sound of a spoiled child realizing that the credit card has finally been declined. I did not watch her go. I turned my back on her just as she had turned her back on me when she thought I was weak. That left Brad, the man who thought he was the king of the castle, the man who thought he could outsmart a structural engineer. He was not huddled in a corner. He was standing by the door arguing with 2 officers. He was red in the face, veins bulging in his neck. He was still trying to negotiate his way out of a felony. "Do not touch me," he shouted, swatting at an officer's hand. "Do you know who I am? I am Bradley Harrison. I manage portfolios for the city council. I play golf with the mayor. This is a misunderstanding. I demand to speak to my lawyer." I rolled my wheelchair over to him. "No." I walked. I kept forgetting that I did not need the chair anymore. The habit of being diminished was hard to break, but I broke it now. I walked up to him, my boots loud on the hardwood floor. "Your lawyer cannot help you, Brad," I said. Brad spun around. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You did this!" he screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "You set me up. You entrapped me. I will sue you, Zeke. I will sue you for every penny you have. I will bury you in litigation for the next 10 years. I laughed. It was a dry, dusty laugh. "With what money, Brad?" I asked. He froze. "I froze the accounts this morning," I said. "Before we came here, Marcus filed the injunctions. Every account with your name on it is locked. Every offshore shell company you set up has been flagged by the FBI. You do not have the money to buy a cup of coffee, let alone a lawyer who can fight federal wire fraud charges." Brad's face crumbled. Brad's face. The arrogance evaporated, leaving only the raw panic of a narcissist facing consequences. "I am a top financial advisor." He shrieked, his voice reaching a hysterical pitch as the officers grabbed his arms. "I am the best in the city. You cannot do this to me. I have a reputation." The officers dragged him toward the door. He dug his heels into my expensive rug, fighting them every inch of the way. He looked ridiculous. A man in a $3,000 suit being hauled out like common trash. "I am the best," he screamed. "I am a genius. Stop," I ordered. The officers paused. Brad stopped struggling, panting heavily, thinking maybe I had changed my mind, thinking maybe I was going to show mercy. I walked right up to him. I leaned in close until our noses were almost touching. I could smell the sweat of his fear. It overpowered his expensive cologne. He looked into my eyes, expecting to see the confused old man he had tormented. Instead, he saw the cold, hard steel of the man who built this house. "You are not a genius, Brad," I whispered, my voice rough like gravel. "And you are not a financial wizard." I let the silence hang for a second, letting the words sink in. "You are just a petty thief who made the mistake of trying to rob a structural engineer." I pointed a finger at his chest, right over his heart. "I poured the concrete for this foundation 40 years ago. I know every stress point. I know every load-bearing wall. And I know exactly where to push to make the whole thing come down." I leaned back, looking at him with pure disgust. "I built this house to shelter my family, Brad. And I know exactly how to demolish it on top of the vermin who try to infest it." Brad stared at me, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The realization hit him. He had not just lost. He had been outplayed, outmaneuvered, and crushed by the very man he deemed obsolete. "Get him out of my sight," I said, waving my hand. "No," Brad screamed as they dragged him through the doorway. "No, Zeke, wait. We can make a deal. I know where the rest of the money is. I can help you." The heavy oak door slammed shut, cutting off his plea. The sudden silence in the foyer was deafening. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. My chest was heaving. My hands were trembling, but not from Parkinson's, from the adrenaline leaving my body. It was over. The parasites were gone. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Dante. He was standing tall, his suit jacket unbuttoned, looking at the empty space where the chaos had been just moments ago. "They are gone. Dad," he said softly. "Yes," I said, letting out a long, slow breath. "They are gone." I looked around the foyer. I looked at the vase Brad had knocked over. I looked at the coffee stains on the rug. I looked at the scratches on the floor from the struggle. The house was a mess. It was scarred, it was dirty, but it was still standing, just like us. "We have a lot of cleaning up to do," I said, walking toward the kitchen. Dante followed me. But first, he said, picking up the broken pieces of the vase, "I think we should change the locks." I chuckled. It was the first genuine laugh I had felt in years. "Change the locks, son," I said. "Change the codes. And while you are at it, call the contractor. I want those hedges in the back cut down. I am done with blind spots." We walked into the kitchen together. The sun was streaming through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It was a new day, and for the first time in a long time, the air in my house felt clean. The news trucks stayed parked at the bottom of my driveway for 3 days. The same reporters who had called me a dangerous lunatic and a senile kidnapper were now scrambling to call me a hero. They wanted the exclusive interview. They wanted to know how an old structural engineer had outsmarted a corrupt financial advisor and a team of Russian money launderers. They wanted the movie rights. I did not give them a single minute of my time. I closed the heavy oak gates of my estate and I locked them. I did not need their apologies, and I certainly did not need their validation. I knew who I was. I was Isaiah Zeke Thorne, and I had just survived a demolition attempt on my life. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. The district attorney who had been so eager to prosecute me suddenly found his spine when the federal agents got involved. The evidence we provided was irrefutable. The wire transfer records, the forged deed, the video of the poisoning, and the testimony of the Russian nationals who turned state S evidence to avoid deportation. It was a slam-dunk case. Brad tried to cut a deal. He offered to give up names of other corrupt officials in the city government. He squealed like a stuck pig, but it did not save him. The judge gave him 20 years for the fraud alone. The attempted murder charges were just the icing on the cake. Tasha cried in court. She played the victim until the very end. She claimed she was brainwashed. She claimed she was afraid. But the jury saw the video of her wishing for my death. They heard the greed in her voice. They gave her 15 years. And Bernice, my wife, the woman who had mixed arsenic into my morning routine with a smile. She did not even get a trial. She pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. She is currently serving a life sentence in a maximum security facility 3 hours north of here. I have not visited her. I have not written to her. I have not accepted a single collect call from the prison. Forgiveness is a virtue, I suppose, but so is self-preservation. I burned her letters unopened in the fireplace. Some bridges are not meant to be repaired. They are meant to be burned so the enemy can never cross them again. But the real work began after the lawyers went home. The house was still standing, but it felt contaminated. Every room held a memory of their betrayal. The kitchen where Bernice poisoned me. The study where Brad plotted to sell my legacy. The living room where Tasha laughed at my decline. I walked through the halls with Dante a week after the arrests. He was walking without a cane, his stride strong and confident. "It smells like them," Dante said, wrinkling his nose. "It smells like lies." I looked at the crystal chandelier Bernice had bought with my retirement money. I looked at the silk drapes she had insisted on. I looked at the beige carpets she had installed to cover up the beautiful hardwood floors I had laid down in 1990. "You are right, son," I said. "It does smell." I went to the garage and I got the sledgehammers. We did not hire a crew. We did not bring in outsiders. This was personal. This was an exorcism. For the next 6 months, that house became a construction site again. We started in the kitchen. I took the first swing at the granite island where Bernice had prepared her lethal coffee. The sledgehammer hit the stone with a thunderous crack that vibrated up my arms. It felt good. It felt like justice. We smashed the cabinets. We tore out the appliances. We ripped up the tile. We stripped the room down to the studs. We exposed the steel beams I had put in place decades ago. They were still there, strong, uncorrupted, waiting for us to reveal them. We moved to the living room next. We tore down the silk drapes and burned them in a bonfire in the backyard. We ripped up the beige carpet, pulling thousands of staples out of the oak floorboards. When we were done, we sanded the wood until it glowed with its natural warmth again. We removed every trace of Bernice and her children. The gaudy art, the fragile furniture, the pretension. We opened up the walls she had closed off. I had always designed this house to have an open flow to let the light travel from east to west. Bernice had put up partitions because she wanted privacy. She wanted secrets. We tore those partitions down. Sunlight flooded back into the house. It washed away the shadows where they had whispered their conspiracies. Dante worked beside me every day. I watched him lift heavy sheets of drywall. I watched him carry lumber. I watched the muscles in his back ripple with effort. He was not the boy in the wheelchair anymore. He was a man who had reclaimed his body and his birthright. He took over the business too. With his name cleared and his competency proven, he reopened Thorne Structural Engineering. He did not just sit in the office. He went to the sites. He wore the hard hat. He earned the respect of the crews, not because he was my son, but because he knew the work. I watched him leave in the morning in his truck, and I felt a pride that was deeper than the ocean. He was the legacy I had fought for. He was the reason I had survived the poison. 6 months later, the house was finished. It did not look like a museum anymore. It looked like a home. It was simpler. The furniture was sturdy leather and wood. The colors were warm earth tones. The kitchen was designed for cooking meals, not for staging murders. It was a Tuesday evening. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. I sat on the front porch in my rocking chair, the same porch where the police had tried to arrest me. But there were no sirens tonight, just the sound of crickets and the distant hum of the city. The front door opened and Dante stepped out. He was wearing his work boots and jeans covered in dust from a job site. He looked tired, but it was a good tired, the kind of tired a man feels after an honest day's work. He was holding 2 bottles. They were cold bottles of beer, dark stout, the kind I used to drink before Bernice made me switch to herbal tea and poisoned coffee. He handed me one. I took the bottle. The glass was cold against my palm. I looked at the condensation running down the label. I had not touched a drop of coffee in 6 months. I never would again. The smell of it made me sick. But this was safe. Dante sat down in the chair next to me. He cracked his bottle open and took a long drink. "How was work?" I asked. "Good," Dante said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "We poured the foundation for the new library downtown today. The concrete mix was perfect. It is going to stand for 100 years. I nodded. "That is good. A library needs a strong foundation. Books are heavy." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip below the horizon. We did not need to talk about the past. We did not need to talk about the trial or the prison sentences or the betrayal. We had closed that book. We had put it on the shelf, and we were never going to read it again. There was no forgiveness in my heart. I did not wish them well. I did not hope they found peace. I hoped they rotted in their cells, remembering every single day what they had thrown away. But I did not let that hate consume me. I used it as fuel to rebuild, and now that the building was done, I could just rest. Dante looked over at me. "You know, Dad," he said quietly. "Brad sent a letter to the office today, from prison." I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on the sunset. "Did you read it?" I asked. "No," Dante said, taking another sip of beer. "I put it through the shredder. Then I mixed the shreds into the concrete we poured for the library foundation." I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Good," I said. "That is the best place for him. Buried under 1,000 tons of progress." I raised my bottle. "To the foundation," I said. Dante clinked his bottle against mine. "To the foundation," he repeated. We drank our beer as the stars came out over the house we built, the house that tried to kill us, the house we conquered. I was Isaiah Zeke Thorne. I was 73 years old. I had no wife. I had no daughter. But I had my son. I had my home. And I had my dignity. And as I sat there, surrounded by the silence of a peaceful night, I realized that was all a man ever really needed. My story teaches us that silence should never be mistaken for surrender. The world will try to tell you that when you age, you become obsolete or that disability makes you weak. But the truth is, strength has nothing to do with youth or physical perfection. It comes from the will to protect what matters. We all have a choice when betrayal strikes. We can crumble or we can harden like concrete. I chose to stand. If you are facing enemies who smile to your face while holding a knife behind your back, do not scream. Just wait, watch, and when the time is right, remind them that you are the architect of your own life, and no one can tear you down without your permission. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have forgiven them, or would you have pressed the button just like I did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and redemption. See you in the next story. Win.